And welcome everybody to Subnet Saturday. It's a great here. It's a day here. It's Pacific time, 11 o'clock on a Saturday. And I can't think of anywhere I'd rather be right now than spending a few minutes with you talking about route summarization. If you are brand new to the channel, gosh darn it, great to have you. Thank you very much for spending a few minutes with us today. You can also check out the entire playlist for Subnet Saturdays on the YouTube page. So my name is Keith Barker. If you're new to us, my CCNA number is 6783. I've been a CCNA for a long time, over 15 years, have a CCNA route switch and security. And our focus today is on route summarization. Now, I'm anticipating a few things as we get started here. Number one, I'm anticipating that you've seen some of the previous Subnet Saturdays and that you're familiar with some of the basics, like subnetting, like what is a mask, what is it, how does it work, IP addresses, and so forth. And if, in the case you're watching this for the first time you're looking at the stream and think, wow, I'm not quite ready for this yet, stick around, enjoy the time, enjoy the fellowship and the community. And we also have a Discord channel you can join too to ask questions and make requests and so forth. And then you can backfill with the playlist. So Gus and Michael and many others who are in the queue and in the class answering questions and helping out, thank you everybody for being here. And to start off, let's look at a topology and look at a potential problem and then look at a solution we can implement using route summarization, in which point we'll identify what it is, and why it's so darn cool. So let's use this topology right here, and let me bring up this pen as well. Like that, there we go. And let's imagine that we have this network, it's our enterprise network. So life is good, we have lots of routes, and one of the things is this. If this router right here, let's pick on router 8 for a moment. Let me get out a color that we can actually see. Let's pick on router 8 for a moment. If router 8 has 5,000 routes, that routing table is going to be very, very large. And it's going to be more overhead and more CPU on that router to go ahead and process it all. And so if we can summarize, or let's go ahead and go to the big camera for a second. Let's imagine that we have some relatives on the East Coast. Let's say we have like 10 relatives on the East Coast of whatever country you live in, on the east side of the country. And if we wanted to tell somebody about those relatives, we could say, yeah, I've got 10 relatives. They are so-and-so and so-and-so and Bob and Lois and Sally and Ben and Jeff and everybody else. And we list them all off in detail, and that's a lot of data, those 10 relatives. Or we could say, hey, I've got 10 relatives. They all live over on the East Coast side of the country, and if I ever need to reach them, they're all over there on the East Coast. A summary is simply not having all the details for all the specific individuals in this example, but rather knowing that those individuals exist or knowing how to reach them. And in the case of routing, instead of having 10,000 routes, we could have a summary which simply says, hey, that group of routes, here's your single route for that whole range of networks. And that way a router could have like one route or two routes instead of 1,000 or 10,000. And that way it can simplify the routing table. So when the router has to make a decision about routing to those remote networks, it doesn't say, okay, let me see what the best match is from the routing table for these 10,000 routes. It can just say, oh, I've got one route. It matches the destination IP address. It uses it and says next packet, please, instead of having a whole bunch of routes. I dropped my pen. Let me grab it real quick. And I felt it drop. It's down here somewhere. Oh, there it is. Okay, got it. Here's my my tablet pen that I use. All right, so what I'd like to do is demonstrate how we could do a summarization. And then even though in CCNA, it doesn't involve on the blueprint EAGRP, and it doesn't involve multiple area OSPF and some other techniques, I'd like to share with you how we can do summarization and also give you a few examples that you can take home with you and say, oh, okay, I get it. Summarization is not only the idea of taking a bunch of routes and having one route instead of all the detailed routes, but I can also show you some examples that you can take home and say, yep, I saw it in action, and I could replicate this if I wanted to in my own environment by summarizing some networks. So let's use this topology, and we'll pick on R8. And I think a demonstration would be probably the best thing to do here. Now, in this topology, I'll bring up the lab here in a second. If all these networks, let's imagine up here in this part of the network, it's the 10.0 networks and then I use the router numbers. So this is 10.12, and this network here is 10.34. And then between R3 and R5 is 10.35. Oh, excuse me. I slipped a couple bits. That's going to be important because I want to give you the right information. So this would be 10.0.35. And over here on the left-hand side, it's 10.1. And then the router numbers, 35. Oh, gosh. I'm so excited. Just wash my hands and I can't do a thing with them. This is between R3 and R4, so that would be network 34 there. I'll slow down just a little bit. And then here between R3 and R5, it's 10.1.35. And over here between R5 and R7, it's 10.1.57. And that continues over here. So over here on the right-hand side, it's network 10.2. And over here, between R4 and R6, it would be 46. And between R6 and R8, it would be 68. So 10.2.68. So here's what I propose we do. Ospf is fair game for the CCNA. So let's put on Ospf on all of these routers and then take a look at all the routes that R8 has, and let's proceed to that point. So that'll be a good rehearsal on implementing Ospf and verifying that it's worked in a single area. So we won't do multiple area Ospf, we'll do single area. And let me clear that off, and let's bring up the lab. Alrighty, so I'm going to use Notepad because a lot of these commands are going to be very repetitive. So I'm just going to go to Notepad. I'll make the font a little bigger so we can see it. Format font. How about a 18-point font? That'll do. And let's go into configuration mode and no router Ospf1. Currently these routers have some Ospf cooking on them. I'm just going to get rid of it. So from the ground up, we can see exactly what the routing protocol is. And then we'll do a router Ospf1 and then a network statement like that, which means any interfaces that have IPv4 interfaces on them on the router means they get to participate in area 0 of Ospf. And that'll be a great start. Oh, you know what? Let's also do this. Because the default auto cost reference bandwidth, which we've talked about in previous videos as part of these live streams, the auto cost reference bandwidth thinks the fastest interface is 100 megabits. So we'll change that with auto-cost reference bandwidth, the rest of that spelled out, and we'll set it to a gig or 1,000 megabits per second. Okay, great. That way we can have accurate information regarding the cost for Ospf. Okay, so I'll copy that. We'll go to R1, paste it in, make sure that works. Great. And then we'll go to R2. R3, I'm just right-clicking on each one of these and just pasting it in. All right. So in just a few moments, they're going to go through the whole neighboring state, and they're going to be, many of these are going to have, in fact, all these directly connected neighbors are going to have full adjacencies because there's nobody else on the network except those two on that segment. So we're going to go through from down to init, 2A, xstart, exchange, loading, and full, the ITL. We had a stream on how they form neighborships. So here on R8, how do we verify that we have Ospf running? We do a show IP Ospf neighbor. That's one option. So we have one neighbor. The router ID of our neighbor is 6666, which is R6's router ID. And it is currently, there we go. So it's now up. We just went from loading to full. Now if we do a show IP Ospf neighbor, now we have a neighbor. Now, because it says that our neighbor is the BDR, and we're the only other device on this network segment, that means we, on this network segment, are the DR. We can verify that with the show IP Ospf interface brief. And sure enough, on that fast Ethernet 4/1, we are the designated router, and R6 is the backup designated router. And we have a full adjacency. Great. We've taken a look at those concepts previously. Now, let's take a look at the routing table. If we do a show IP route, and it's going to limit this output to Ospf learned routes. So show IP route, Ospf, press enter, and okay, so we have quite a few routes. In the 10 space here, we have the 10 zeros, and we have some 10 ones and a few 10 twos. The reason we don't have as many 10 twos is because we're in that area where, or that part of the network where it's 10.2. So directly connected networks in 10.2 are not going to show up in this output because I said, please just show me the Ospf learned routes. So if we wanted to summarize, one of the things we could do is we could summarize and not have this router have to learn all about the 10s. Instead, we could have a summary route that says, hey, in fact, let's look at our topology. Where could we do that? That would make sense. The place, I think, that would make sense to do that would be right here on R4. And what R4 could do is say, you know what, instead of having to learn all these 10s, I mean, everything that's not here local, it has to be forwarded through R4 to get to the rest of the network. So R4 could create a summary that says, hey, to get to 10 anything, go ahead and forward it to me, says R4, and then you don't have to, and I could also suppress, says R4, I could suppress all those other routes from being learned. And that's the concept. 10 is a summary route that would cover 10.0 dot anything, like 10.0.12. Let me back that up. 10.0.12.0 and 10.0.34.0 and 10.0.24.0, and the list goes on. We could basically not have to advertise those down off of R4, instead just advertise a summary saying, hey, to get to 10 anything, if you don't have a more exact route in your routing table, because that's how they make their decisions, go ahead and forward it my way, says R4, and that would be an example of a summary. So R8 could lose all those networks, all those more detailed networks, and not have to learn about all the routes for all the networks. It could just have a summary advertised by R4. Now, that's the good news and the bad news. I'll tell you why it's both. It's good news and it's bad news because in order to do that at that router, R4, it has to be an area border router, which is beyond the scope of CCNA. But the way it works is, and you'll see this in CCNP, an area border router is a router that's connected to the backbone and a non-backbone area. And at an area border router, we can do summaries like that with the range command. So if R4 was connected to the backbone and connected to area, or in this case, area 2 maybe, or area 1, we could use an area command and an area range command in the router config and tell it to do a summary. Now, unfortunately, one of the rules about Ospf is that if it's all just one giant area, which is what it is here and in CCNA, there's no area border routers. So because everybody in the same area has the same LSAs, the link state database, that they all know exactly the picture of the network, we can do some filtering about which routes make it to the routing table. But generally speaking, if we have 28 routers in one area, they're all going to have the exact same picture of the network, and we're not going to do any route filtering. So I thought to myself, well, Keith, you can't just leave the class hanging, right? You can't just leave us sitting here saying, well, summaries are great, but you can't do them in a single area Ospf. I thought to myself, how could we still demonstrate this in measurable terms? And the answer is we could do a little bit of redistribution. Now, let me explain what that is. Let's imagine that you have a family in some country, doesn't matter, some country, and that family invites a foreign exchange student over. So the foreign exchange student comes over to live with that host family for a week or a month or 3 months, whatever it is, and then when that family goes to a faith-based organization, or they go to a dinner, or they go to a dance at the local high school, whatever, some grouping, some gathering, they're going to bring that foreign exchange student with them. And the foreign exchange student may have different customs and different habits and may look or dress slightly differently, but they'll still bring them. Now, how does that relate to Ospf? Well, in Ospf, we have routes that are being shared and advertised by Ospf. Think of those like routes that belong to the family. But a router in Ospf can invite a foreign exchange student to join, and that's called an external route. So we could have one of these routers, and we have 8 to play with. We could have one of these routers redistribute is what the command is we could have them take routes that are not Ospf, like static routes or routes from RIP or routes from EIGRP or some other source, and just like, boom, plug them in to the Ospf family. And when it does that, those are considered external routes. And they look a little different too. I mean, they don't have the same exact characteristics of a native Ospf route like you did with the network statement. But if we do this, which is what I'd like to do for the demo, if we take R1 or R7 or both, and we take some static routes and we redistribute them into Ospf, then we can do summaries on all those routes that they're bringing in. So for a little education that you can use in CCNP, a device like router 1, let me bring up the topology, a device like router 1 that is redistributing routes. So let's say we have 4 static routes on R1. And if we take those 4 external, they're not Ospf routes, and we redistribute them into Ospf, at that moment, this router is called an ASBR. It simply means it's the host family that's inviting the foreign student into their home and into their community and into all their activities. So an ASBR is an Ospf router that is taking external routes and just injecting them into Ospf so that they can be shared and learned about by all the other Ospf speakers and routers. And that device that does it is called an Autonomous System Boundary Router, an ASBR. So here is what I would like to do. I think this would be, so you're not, as a CCNA, you don't have to remember that, but it's not a bad idea to be aware of that in the future, because when we hit CCNP, You'll need that. All right, so let's go to R1 and also R7, and let's see if we have some static routes that we can redistribute into OSPF. So here is R1, and let's do this. Let's just show IP route static. All this is going to show us is that, hey, Mr. R1, please show us any routes that you have that are static routes. Okay, will do. And it has these 4 routes. So if we want to take these 4 foreign exchange routes, we'll call them, and they're called external routes in OSPF, and we redistribute them into OSPF, the syntax to do that is we go to router configuration mode, router OSPF1. This is like the host family. And then we say, please welcome these external routes. And the way we do that is with the command redistribute. It's basically taking those routes and putting them into OSPF. So redistribute, and it says, well, what do you want me to redistribute? And we, in our case, we're going to redistribute static routes because we have 4 of them. I know it. We just looked at them. So we'll say redistribute static, and then we have options regarding the metric. So we'll save a larger discussion for Encore and other courses about, the metrics, but by default, it's going to bring it in as a type 2 metric with OSPF, which simply means an external type 2, which means the metric doesn't grow. It's like the cost is like, okay, you're 20, and no matter where that route shows up in all of OSPF, it has the cost of 20. I personally don't like that. I like the metric to grow as that route is propagated through the network. So let's change the metric type. Instead of the default of 2, and we'll go ahead and use a metric type of 1. And we could also set the initial metric as well. But with the metric type of 1, it just means that that metric is going to get larger and larger as OSPF routers take these external routes and they share them and they propagate them through the network. And everybody has the LSAs for them. It simply makes the metric grow. All right, so, and I also want subnets too. Otherwise, I'm going to get classful redistribution. So static subnets. I thank the context-sensitive help for giving me that feedback. Okay, so redistribute static subnets metric type 1. And if we do this, show IP OSPF and press enter, check this out. Somewhere along here we go. It says, hey, because I'm redistributing some other routes into OSPF, and for only that reason, I am now an Autonomous System Boundary Router, or ASBR. And it tells us exactly what we're doing. We're redistributing external routes from static routes into OSPF. Now, if we take a peek over at R8, now my hands will never leave my arms, and so we know where R8 is. R8 is down here. So we just did the redistribution on R1, and OSPF is pretty darn quick. Link state updates the link state advertisements, and the updates get propagated through the entire area. If we go to R8 now, which we will, and we hit the up arrow command, show IP route OSPF learned routes again, and we hit the space bar, check this out. We have those 4 external routes. So the O means OSPF, E represents an external route, and the 1 represents the type, which is the one where the metric grows as that route gets further and further away from the source, from the ASBR. Okay, so we've learned a couple things about how to get routes into OSPF if we don't use a network statement or an interface command, external routes. They also have a special LSA type, which is interesting. It's an LSA type 5, but that's above and beyond what you have to memorize for the CCNA, but it is true. So I want to share that with you. We'll be using that at CCNP level. Now, we have these 4 routes, and what I would like to do is talk about how we could summarize 4 routes like that. And I'm going to bring that up a little bit. I'm going to bring up a pen, and let's talk about creating one route, sort of like Lord of the Rings, one route, one ring to rule them all. If we wanted to create a summary route that said, hey, this one route represents these 4 routes, it'd be simpler. Now, this is an example of a summary of one summary route to 4 detailed routes. But think of it on a bigger scale. Like maybe we have one route that points to a whole division of our network, which could have thousands and thousands of routes. The concept is the same. We want to reduce the number of individual routes and still have a summary route in place. So R8, if it gets a packet to any of these destinations, can still go ahead and forward it. So here's one method, not the only method, but here's one method of creating a summary. It is identify how much of these networks are the same. It's a fun game. Let's do it. So if we have 10.11.11. I'm going to use a different color too. I'm going to mix this up a little bit, make it a little bit more visually attractive here. Let's say we have, actually they're right here. So I'll write them out again. 10.11.11.16, and these all have a 28-bit mask. So if you need to catch up on that with the Subnet Saturday playlist, please feel free to do so. So I'll say /28 for all of them. And 10.11.11.32 and .48 and .64 with the 10.11.11. 10.11.11. Great. Okay. So there's 4 routes. How in the world do we go about making a summary? Or how do we even know what the correct summary would be? And I've got some ideas. Here's one idea. Well, they all start with 10. We could just make a summary route that looks like this, 10.0.0.0/8. And that would cover it. It would. That would cover all these routes because they all start with 10. However, this is what we would call a gross over summarization because it not only covers 10.11.11, but it also covers 10.11.12 and 10.11.13 and 10.11.14 and probably, hundreds of thousands of other routes that could fall into that address space. So when creating summaries, we want to create a summary that's accurate for the routes that we're trying to summarize and not over summarize. In fact, you want to know what the ultimate summary is? The ultimate summary is this. And if you're saying, well, Keith, that's a default route. Yeah. That default route says, I match everything. And that's why we fall back to a default route from a routing table. If we don't have a more specific match in the routing table, it goes to the default route, which never misses. The default route matches everything. It's not very long. So it's not going to be the longest match. And longest matches get chosen first for routes. And then the fallback is if we have a default route, then go ahead and use that. But it's the ultimate summary. And so this would be too much of a summary for these 4 networks. It's too broad. This would be too much of a summary for these 4 networks. It's too broad. So here's an idea. We could just say visually, okay, the first octet, let's go ahead and circle or highlight, use a color like, let's use red. Let's circle or square off the ones that are the same. So the first octet is the same for each one. I think we all can agree on that. And the second octet and the third octet are the same for all of them. So we could do maybe 10.11.11 with a 24-bit mask. And I would argue that that does indeed summarize all those networks. It summarizes the 16 subnet, 32, 48, 64, but it also summarizes the additional subnets in that range, like the 0 subnet and the subnet that is 64 plus 16 more, which I guess would be 80, the 80 subnet, and the 90, and looking at 96 subnet. I'm just taking the block size in my head and adding it. So this summary right here would cover these, but it's too broad still. So how do we get like fairly accurate with a summary address that matches on these 4 subnets? And the answer, one of the answers, is after you get more used to it, you might be able to visually see where they all lie. However, for a person who is fairly new to this, here's what I would do. We'll take this table, which we've probably never seen before. And when in doubt, if you're not sure what to do to solve a problem, write out this table. It's just 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128. And I'm going to count the positions, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I count them because in the heat of battle, if I skipped a digit there, it's going to be terrible. And also when you start doing your calculations, they're not going to come out right. You're like, what? So I just count them, making sure I have all 8 positions there. And what we're looking at here is we're looking at this 4th octet. So the other thing I would do is I would say 3rd goes that way, and 4th goes this way. And that way I can remember which octet I'm focusing on. I want to see which bits, which high order bits are the same for those. So we take those addresses. I will take 16, 32, 48, and 64. You're probably ahead of me on this already. So great job. And we'll just calculate the values of each of those so we can see which common bits are the same in that 4th octet. So 16 is pretty easy. That's on here and off everywhere else. And I'm referring to the actual IP address, that the network ID in that last octet. So that's 16. Then 32 would be like this. Boom. So I'm just taking the value, boom, 32. Everything else would be a 0. And then 48 would be 32 plus 16. So that'd be here and here. And you can do that longhand. Take your time, doesn't matter. Just calculate, what is 48 minus 32 at 16. So just put the values in. And we've had sessions on binary to decimal and decimal to binary, all that great stuff. And then what we'll do is we'll take 64, which is on here. So that's going to be off, and the rest of these are going to be off. So we're going to play the same game we did here, like, okay, which octets are complete, match each other, the first 3 match, and how many bits of that 4th octet match for each of the networks. And let's do the same thing we did here. We'll just circle them or put a square around them. So this bit matches, would you agree? In all 4 subnets, this high order bit, this low order bit, this is the first bit that's on in the mask. That's the first, this is the first bit of the last octet, and it matches. And 64 is 0, 0. Oh, bummer, this doesn't match. So what we could do is say, well, you know what? Up to this point right here, everything matches. And so the mask for that would be, well, if this is the 24-bit mark here, plus 1 more bit that matches, our mask for the summary is going to be a /25, which means the first 25 bits match with this one, this one, this one, this one. That's what it means. Now the question is, what do we put in for the that last octet? So it's going to be something like this, not something like this. It's going to be this, 10.11.11. That's the first 24 bits. And then whatever the value is in this 128 position, it's 0. And then you simply zero out everything to the right. So because this high order bit that matches is a 0, I should say, it's the first bit of that 4th octet, which is the 128 position. Because it's a 0, and there's 0 out after that, you go ahead and put a 0 with a /25, and that is our summary. That very, very closely matches these 4 networks. So if we were to create a summary and said, hey, instead of advertising 10, 11, 11, 16, and 10, 11, 11, 32, and 10, 11, 11, 48, and 10, 11, 11, 64, just advertise this one summary, and that'll give you the ability to go ahead and reduce everybody's routing table by 3. Instead of having these 4 routes, they just have this one. That's the theory. And in Ospf, the reason I did it with an autonomous system boundary router is because we don't have ABRs in single area Ospf. So there's no option to even show you if we have a single area Ospf with only internal routes. So I created these 4 static routes on R1, and I injected them with redistribution so we can go back to R1, the ASBR, and we can create this summary address. And the syntax for creating that summary in Ospf is we simply go to router configuration mode here on R1, which we'll do here in a moment. And in router config, we'll simply say summary address because it's an ASBR. And then we'll specify this summary. And what R1 will do, he'll say, oh, I get it. I'm going to just advertise the summary. I'm not going to advertise the detailed routes. And the entire network has just had their load lightened by 3 routes they don't need to know. And the same concept applies if it was hundreds or possibly thousands of routes that were being advertised. We can now summarize with 1 or a few routes instead of all the routes, all the detailed routes. So let me just hide this work we just did, and let's confirm our addresses, our routes here on R8. We'll do a show IP route Ospf just to make sure we're on the same sheet of music. So currently we have these 4 external routes, external type 1s, and we're about to reduce that on R1 by going into router configuration mode. And this is the ASBR. This is the guy bringing those routes to the party. We're simply saying, hey, you have 4 foreign exchange students coming in. Let's go ahead and just, as you present them to the network, present them as 1 foreign exchange student with a /25 instead of 4 routes with a /28. So let's do that. Router Ospf 1, and we are going to do a question mark as I get my brain kicked in. Hold on a second. I hit up arrow. I hit up arrow for context sensitive help again. There it is, right there. So on an ASBR, the command we're going to use is summary address in router configuration mode. So we'll say summary address, and it says, great, what's the summary? And this is going to apply those routes that are being redistributed in via the redistribute command. So the summary address is going to be 10.11.11.0, and the mask. Oh wait, hold on a second. Okay, some of the commands for summarization you can use a / notation, but it's going to make me put in the 8 bits, 16 bits, 24 bits, 25 bits. So that's a 25-bit mask. So there's our summary. And we'll go check it out. Let's go down to R8. And a moment ago on R8, we had these 4 external type 1s because the ASBR wasn't doing any summarization. Now that it's doing summarization, and I am giving it a few seconds to converge. now that we're doing summarization, we should have one route there, and that should be the /25. So I'll hit the up arrow key, show IP route Ospf, and there it is. So we have that one route, which is a summary route. And the same concept holds true with other routers. In fact, let's repeat that process, but now that we understand how it works, let's do a little bit faster. Here on router 7, I also have some static routes. They are 107777 with 4 networks. Same 4 networks, we can use the same summary again, same mask. And if we go to R7, the first thing we'd want to do is verify that we have those routes. Show IP route, static. There they are. Great. And we'll do a config T, router, OSPF1, and we'll do redistribute static, which will include all those bad boys. And we'll say, I'm going to leave the default metrics this time, which is a metric type 2. And also the metric type 2 doesn't change. It just sticks it at a 20, I believe, is the default. And that will be the metric we'll see way over on R8 on the other side of the network. So redistribute static, and we'll include subnets because we don't want just classful boundaries. And it is done. Let's just go take a peek at R8 for a moment. So here on R8, if we do a show IP route OSPF, there they are. So all these 7 routes, these 7777, are the routes that we learned via OSPF about the redistributed routes that our good buddy R7 just brought to the table. And then we'll go tell R7, the autonomous system boundary router, hey, let's summarize those. So we're still in router configuration mode for OSPF, and the command is summary address. And then we put in our summary. So it's going to be 10.77.77.0. Same concept that we did with the other math on the other one. And then we'll do a mask of 25 bits, which is spelled like that, 128. And then if we go, so that information has been communicated via LSAs. Those LSAs have been synchronized from neighbor to neighbor to neighbor. So R8 in the same area has the same information now. And if we go to R8 and do a show IP route for OSPF, it should now have a single summary for that route for those set of routes that R7 brought to the table. So that's an example of summarization with OSPF. And again, we use the external routes because inside of OSPF with a single area, there's no opportunity to do true route summarization without an ABR. And that'll be coming up in CCNP. We'll talk more about that. Okay, so that was one example I wanted to chat with you about. The other one, I thought maybe one more example, because not every routing protocol summarizes the same way. EIGRP, the Enhanced Interior Gateway Routing Protocol, I've got a lot of requests for, hey, can you walk us through that? And I have been reluctant to because EIGRP is not part of the blueprint for CCNA. However, it's important to know what the default AD is, the administrative distance, which is 90 for internal EIGRP routes. And what we're about to see is, hey, what would be the administrative distance for an external EIGRP route, which is different. I believe it's 170, but we'll take a look here in a moment because it's going to come up. This is one of the benefits of doing hands-on as well. You can actually see those values as they come up in the interface. So with EIGRP and RIP, although I'm not going to demo RIP, we summarize at interface boundaries, and it goes something like this. If we are, let me bring up my topology. And here it is. Thank you. So if we wanted to, let's imagine we have the same networks. And we're going to be running EIGRP here in a moment. With EIGRP, we pick an interface. Literally, almost any interface you want. Let's pick this one right here. So we could, after EIGRP is running, we could go to this interface, 3/1, and say, hey, you know what? We'd like you to, instead of, EIGRP is distance vector, and it has some characteristics of link state in that it forms adjacencies with its neighbors and it cares about its neighbors, but there's no link state database that's replicated across the whole area. Basically, where EIGRP speakers believe what their directly connected neighbors have said, and they're going based on that. So with R4, if R4 has learned about all these routes, 10.0 this and 10.1 that, and all these other networks, we can actually do summarization at the interface and we can tell R4, hey, you know what? As you start learning all these routes, why not just don't bother sharing all that information with R6, because he's just going to tell R8 and have all these routes down here. Why don't we create a summary? And the summary with EIGRP is done on an interface by interface basis. So think of the interface as the one that where the, I'm going to draw it like this. It's where the summary is going to be advertised to, like a microphone, or be amplified out that direction. So that helps R6 and R8 and other devices down here with only seeing the summaries and not seeing the more detailed routes. So the concept is the same, a summary route, but the implementation with EIGRP is done on the interface. It's also done the same way with RIP at the interface where you want to do the summarization. So let's take this plan right here. Let's wipe out our Ospf. We'll just lay in EIGRP. I'll use Notepad. It won't be too painful. And then we'll verify all the routes that we have in the enterprise. And then we'll go to R4. We'll tell it to do a summary at interface 3/1. And then as a result, we'll see those routes drop off of R6 and R8, and they'll just have the summary routes, and they won't any longer have the more detailed routes. Again, this is an example of network summarization with IPv4. And the same concepts, by the way, work with other platforms too. So the syntax and discussion we're having here is with Cisco gear, but summarization and summarizing multiple networks with one is a concept we're going to use on multiple vendors' platforms. Also, when you think of subnetting, we're making the mask longer. And when we think of doing summarization, we're making the masks shorter. So a shorter mask, a shorter network address that's representing many addresses or networks beneath it, like an umbrella. So subnetting, mask is longer. Supernetting is another term for it. Supernetting or summarization is another term for summarizing multiple networks. So having said that, let's go to this topology, and I've got a little bit of work to do. I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid. We can do it. And here we go. And I'm bringing up Notepad. So I'm going to say config t, no router. Now, we could leave Ospf running, add EIGRP, and whenever there's a conflict, meaning Ospf and EIGRP both are advertising a network, the one with the lowest administrative distance is going to win, which in this case with EIGRP for internal routes, it's going to be 90. It would beat out Ospf. The reason I'm going to take it off, though, is because once we get a summary from EIGRP, those more detailed routes don't show up anymore, and then Ospf says, hey, I get to go to the routing table, and then they flood in with Ospf learned routes. So just from the perspective of learning, and at the NA level, I'm going to just remove Ospf so that we don't have the more detailed routes automatically showing up as Ospf learned routes when we have the summary that's hiding those in EIGRP, because it'll be cleaner and easier to learn. So nope, router, Ospf 1. That'll do it. And then router, EIGRP. This is the autonomous system. Every router running EIGRP in the same domain needs to match on that autonomous system number. That has to match. So Ospf, it's a process ID, it doesn't have to match. EIGRP, it's an autonomous system number, it does have to match. And then we'll do no auto summary. On current versions of iOS, auto summary, I believe, is turned off by default. If it's not, this won't harm. If it is, this won't harm anything. I just don't want it summarizing to classful boundaries, which is a real pain in the rear. And then we'll do a network of everything, which is spelled like this. And there's more than one way to put this in. However, that wildcard mask in EIGRP means the same thing as the wildcard mask in Ospf. It says, hey, any interfaces running IP version 4, you're in. And we'll test this on one router and make sure it works, and then we'll pump it into the other. So I will right-click and copy that. That's going to be important. Go to R1 and watch our neighborships blow up. Boom, ba-boom, ba-boom, because I just took off Ospf off this guy. And R2, same thing. Looks good. I'm just going down the horn. Now, EIGRP is pretty darn fast. Even though it doesn't have a full picture of the entire network, the convergence is pretty darn quick. So if we did a show IP route for EIGRP learned routes and pressed enter, EIGRP. Oh, excuse me. I have a little glitch in my get along here. It's totally just me. So show IP route EIGRP. There's our EIGRP learned routes. So now R8 has all these routes. If we wanted to summarize, So we could, once again, if we wanted to, we could redistribute routes into EIGRP and even get more, but I think we could summarize like lots of these. So let's pick on some and summarize some of them. Now we could just say 10 anything, and that would be an 8-bit summary, and that would catch all these, but it'd be a gross over summarization because we'd be catching a whole bunch of networks that also don't apply. So let's make a plan together, you and I. A plan that's going to require us to exercise our summarization skills, and let's summarize. Let's summarize these 4 routes. Now, when you're doing summarization, if it's not designed and doesn't fall in clean boundaries, you might pick up additional networks that you didn't intend to. But let's create, as an exercise, the tightest summary we can for these 4 networks, and then we'll implement it, and that will help us verify that it's working. So if these networks 12, 13, 24, 34, great. So let's bring up our table here. 1, 2, 4, 8. Oh, am I hiding that with my face? I am. Let me back that off so you can actually see it. That might be helpful. All right. 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128. Looking at my feedback monitor. Okay, we can see those. That's going to be helpful. And what we're after is matching on how much of these 4 networks match. Now I know that the first octet matches and the second octet matches 100%. So we know the new mask is going to be at least 16. And the address is going to be, the summary is going to be 10.0 dot. And now we have to figure out in that third octet how many bits, starting from left to right, are in common between them. So let's do this. Let's make sure we're on the right octet. So this is the third octet going this way. Second octet going that way, which is already consumed, 16 bits. And let's write them out. So we have, I'm going to use a slightly different color here. So we have 12, 13, 24, and 34. All right, so in doing this, 12 would be 8 plus 4, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Just want to make sure my math is correct. And everything else would be zeros. So that's 12 done. And 13 would be 8 plus 4 plus 1 more. And then everything else would be zeros. And if you haven't yet joined us for binary to decimal, decimal to binary, those are 2 rip-roaring videos that you want to catch. And then 24, it wouldn't be 32, so it would be 24. I'm just going to do the math on this. 24, is that in my, no, good. 24 minus the 16 we just gave away. Carry the 1, that'd be 8, and 8. Okay, so 8 left over, so that's this guy right there. And then boom, boom, boom. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Great, great. And then 34, which would be one of these, 32 plus 2 more. That one. And I'm just going over this as if we've already covered the binary to decimal, decimal to binary. And with that in place, this is our third octet now. Let's find out which ones match. And here's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking this bit matches in all of them. So does this one. So, oh, but this one doesn't. Let me grab a, hold on one second. All right. I'm nursing a cold, but it's not a virus. Not that virus. All right, so these 2 bits match in all these, and there's the dividing line. So our new mask would be the existing 16 from these first 2 octets, and then 2 more, 17, 18. So our new mask for the summary would be 18. The first 2 octets would be 10.0, and then what we do is we take the value, if any, from these first 2 bits and check them out. They're all zeros. So that means for that third octet, it's not going to be 128, it's not going to be 64, it's not going to be 192, the sum of them, because they're all zeros. We take that value, and then we zero out everything to the far right, and that would be our summary. And what that should catch is it should catch these 4 networks, 18, and it's also going to capture these 4 too. And that's just a fact of the matter is that 1, 2, 3, and 4 are all going to have these same high order bits. So this summary of 10.0.0.18 is not only going to capture those 4 we intended, which is the tightest match we can just for those 4 networks, it's also going to capture these. I just wanted to point that out before we put it in, because these networks, 10.0.1, 10.0.2 to 10.0.3, they have the same common 18 bits that they lead with. All right, so that's the mask, or that's the summary we're going to put in. And the way we put in a summary with EIGRP is, let me go ahead and hide that for a moment, is we do this. We go to the interface. We're going to go to interface gig 3/1 here on R4, and we are going to specify that we're going to use an IP summary address on the interface with that mask and with that IP address, with that subnet. And what it should do, it should, on R8, all those routes that we saw a few moments ago, and I think 8 routes in total, should no longer be present, because they'll be replaced by the summary. That's my thinking. Let's go ahead and do it. So on R8, just before we do the summary, let's just do a comparison. Here's our here's our EIGRP learned routes. Great. And it includes all these routes which are about to be summarized by the summary we're about to create. And let's go implement it on R4. So on R4, we'll just show IP interface brief and a this is my own backend stuff. I caused that myself. All right, let's do a show IP interface brief and a show CDP neighbor. I just want to verify what interface we're going to do this on. So we are going to do this on serial 3/1. That's R4's interface connecting down to R6. So whatever we advertise down to R6 off this interface will include our summary. Any more detailed routes that R3 or R4 has in its routing table from EIGRP will be restricted, not advertised. It'll just advertise the summary and withhold those other now 8 routes, the 8 detailed routes. So to do this, we'll go into configuration mode, interface serial 3/1, and the command IP summary. Yeah, he shoots, he scores. So in Ospf with an autonomous system boundary router, it was summary address, no IP in front of it. It was in router config. This is an interface config. So our summary address is going to be for EIGRP regarding the routes we're summarizing, not RIP. And then we're going to specify the autonomous system number. It's AS1. We could verify that with the show IP protocols, by the way, to verify that. And then the summary. And I didn't erase this because I wanted to look at it. Okay. So our summary is going to be 10.0.0.0 with an 18-bit mask. That's the summary we're going to add. So we'll put in 10.0.0.0 with an 18-bit mask. Oh, check this out. Ah! It's party time at the CLI. We can do a slash notation. And that's exactly what I'm going to do. So instead of doing it in dotted decimal, which we have the option to, we could also go ahead and just do it with a slash. And I'm so excited now. I didn't look. 18. All right. So /18. Ta-da! All right, so we send a little notification to our neighbor saying, hey, things have changed. And now, if we go down to R8, just as a visual here, R4 on this serial 3/1 interface now is summarizing any routes any detailed routes that fall into that summary it created, and it's only going to advertise the summary. And let's take a look. So going down to R8. Oh, I'm already there. Okay, so we'll do a show IP route. Survey says, look at that bad boy right there. There's our 10.0.0.0/18, which is summarizing all those other routes that started with 10.0, including the .1, .2, .3, .4, I think it was, plus the 4 that we did the calculations for. They all fell into that range. Now, one of the challenges is this. What if a router does a summary? Think of R4. Imagine that you and I are R6 or R8, and we're hearing about the summary for the 10.0.0/18. Imagine we have a packet for 10.0.0, some network that isn't anywhere in our enterprise, but it falls in that summary. We're gonna believe we can reach it. We're gonna forward based on that matching route in our routing table, the /18, even if that route doesn't exist. So we forward it up to R4. Here's what Cisco did for us with EIGRP. When we created that summary, it not only advertised that summary down to its neighbors off that interface, but it also created a static route to null 0, which means that if we have a packet that got forwarded to us, says R4, and we don't have a more specific route in our routing table, meaning that network doesn't exist, we are going to go ahead and send it to the static route, which goes to null 0. Null 0 is a fancy way of saying the bit bucket, the end of the road, kill the packet. And we should be able to see that on R4 with the show IP route. So let's verify that as well. So here on R4, if we go back to R4, and we'll do a show. I'll bring that mic over. Show IP route static. All this says is please show me the static routes that you currently have. Oh, maybe I apologize. Maybe it's an EIGRP route for that null address. I think that's going to be the case. Show IP route. Let's just do the whole thing. Show IP route. And there it is right there. So it didn't put it in as a static route. It put it in. So with NAT, when you do the add route command, it adds a static route. So with EIGRP, when we did the summary for the 10.0.0.18, it also created an EIGRP route that shows up on the router as EIGRP learned going to null 0. And that's just to catch strays. So if we don't have, say a packet goes to 10.0, let's say the 10.0.0.8 network, a host on 10.0.0.8, the router, when it gets it, would say, I don't have a more detailed route for that. So as a result, that falls into my summary. That match for the 10.0.0.18, I'm going to send it to the bit bucket instead of sending it on over to a default gateway or some other next router who also won't know how to reach it. So that's what happens by default. So what did we cover in this video and in this demonstration? We've taken a look at summarization. And think of summarization as the idea of not having to know all the details. Like maybe we're an employee at work and we have a manager. And the manager may have a better picture of the whole organization. And maybe we don't. But again, maybe we don't need it. So maybe the manager is sharing with us a limited amount of information, like here's some key data points, here's your primary responsibilities, here's how you add value to the company, thank you for doing a good job. And at the same time, that same manager isn't sharing with us all the details, the profit and loss statements, and everything else for the entire organization, but rather he's just giving us a summary saying, hey, we're doing well, and here's your responsibilities. And so when we're taking a look at summarization, the ultimate summary is a default route. It says, hey, this matches everything. And then when we start creating summaries on purpose, we want to make sure we're creating summaries that are accurate for the networks that we're going to summarize. And then depending on the type of routing we're using, whether it's OSPF, external routes, EIGRP, and so forth, there's different ways, we demonstrated 2 of them, of implementing that summarization on the router itself. In the case of OSPF, in the case of OSPF, we did a summarization at an autonomous system boundary router. In OSPF, if we had multiple areas with ABRs, we'd use the area range command on an ABR. So it's still possible if you have multiple areas in OSPF, and you can summarize at those areas. And in the case of EIGRP and RIP, we summarize at the actual interfaces, and then we demonstrated that as well. So the takeaway, summarization allows the network to advertise a single route that is covering or covers the address space of multiple other detailed routes, so that not every router has to have all of that data in their routing tables, which can make cleaner routing. And also, check this out. Here's a huge benefit. Let's go back to the screen for a second. Imagine we're on R7, and we do a show IP route for EIGRP learn. Well, let me make sure I'm in the right place. So R7, which is on the left-hand side of our topology, is way over here on the left-hand side. Currently, there's no filtering happening for him. He knows about all these routes. What happens if the 10.2.8 network goes away? R7 has to know about that. R7 has to update his routing table. R7 has to make a little bit of extra work to go ahead and process that. What happens if the 10.1.35 network goes away? The interface goes down. It's no longer available. The whole network needs to find out. This router has to change its routing table once again. It's like, oh my gosh, it was there, it's not there. And with EIGRP, we have a thing called going active for a route, where if a router had a route and it loses it, it then goes active saying, hey buddy, my net neighbors, I'm looking for this route. I used to have it, now I don't. It's not good. So one of the other benefits of doing summarization is that if R7 was getting summaries for all the 10 networks, which we could do, we could go to R4 in our R3 in our topology and we could say, R3, please summarize everything at 10, and just advertise a 10 summary down to R5 and R7. Then if the detailed routes go away, R7 could care less. It's got that summary route for the 10 anything. It knows how to forward for that. And it doesn't have to be bothered every time there's a topology change or a routing change at the detailed network level. It just has the summaries. And for large networks, that's important, because if we have a corporate network and we have 2 or 3 routes or 100 routes that change, and we have branch offices, it's probably a good bet we don't want those branch offices to have to go ahead and process all that. Oh no, this detailed route went away. Those branch offices really only need a summary or the ultimate summary, which is a default route saying, hey, you're not sure what to do? Send them that way. Or a summary that covers all the routes at headquarters and all the other locations. So the router has like one route for sending everything to 10 going to headquarters. And that's the benefit, another benefit of summaries and network summarization, which again apply to multiple platforms, not just Cisco. Okay, lots of great comment I've seen over here in my peripheral vision. As always, my intention is to talk about a topic. And in Subnet Saturday here, the topic was network summarization, to talk about why it would be beneficial, provide a few examples of it, kind of like a relaxed session about here's how it works. I think we've accomplished that. And then the second part is to put you on a quick pause. I'm going to grab a sip of water, and then we'll come back for Q&A. And what I would love to do for Q&A is I'd like to focus on, I know we covered EIGRP in this as an example of how we could do summarization. And with Ospf, we did external route redistribution, so we could have an example of summarization. But for the Q&A, I would love it if you have any questions that are focused at the CCNA level regarding any of the topics we've covered today, and if you have something beyond what we covered today, but it's in the blueprint, please feel free to ask that as well. I would ask you that just do a @KeithBarker in the Q&A, and that way from starting now going down, I can see it. Because I know Michael and Gus and a lot of other people are answering questions for other people. I don't want to jump in the middle of a conversation. So if you have a question for me, just do @KeithBarker and then your question, and I will grab those going forward. All right. Another great day. Oh my gosh. If you haven't already subscribed, please do so. Don't miss a single session. I love having people in the room when I talk. That sounds kind of vain, but no, it's a little better. There's over 200 people right now, and every one of you is here for a reason. There are some here for entertainment value. Awesome. There's some here to pick up tips. Awesome. There's some here studying strong for your CCNA. Again, excellent. And there's other people here who have their CCNA who are here to serve you and help you in your journey by answering questions and give you insight on how it works and why it works. And my gratitude for your time, for all of you, is just immense. So thank you very much. So I'm going to take a quick sip of water, less than 30 seconds, and we'll be right back to go ahead and go directly into Q&A. Thanks, everyone.
Life is a winding road, no telling where it goes. Driving through days and nights, won't stop for traffic lights. And I really wanna know, really wanna know.
All right, and we are back. Okay, lots of great comments. Let me start picking up with anything that has my name on it. All right, HAMZIX is asking, hey, Mr. Keith, I have a question about something out of CCNA, but I have an exam on it. How about BGP router, get BGP routes and adjacent? Okay, so for anything outside of the topics for CCNA, if you put them in Discord, what I've discovered on the Discord server, we have a section for other, and there's been a lot of help for people who are answering those questions. You can also do an @OGFIT on Discord if you need my attention there as well. So as far as the CCNA content here, I'm primarily focused on CCNA whenever possible. I really want to make sure our channel is synonymous with, hey, if you're studying for your CCNA and you want to have some fun, this is a great way to learn things, to reinforce things, see things in a different light, and you know, check out the master playlist on the channel. And it's Keith Barker on YouTube. The URL, I think, is Sloth. The reason I chose ogit.online/sloth is because one I could easily remember. Also, Sloth's my mascot. Hey, Mr. Sloth. He's back there. He's always consistent. He's just right there all the time. Great guy. All right. Moving down, looking for my name. All right. Another question. Hi, Keith. Is it possible for EIGRP to form neighbor relations if it's one side is /22 connected to a /29? That's a great question. I don't know that I've tried that recently. So with Ospf, because I'm currently like all over that like slobber on a baby, I would be able to tell you, no, it won't take that. The adjacency won't work. But here's what I recommend. If you're curious, if we have, my guess is they wouldn't like it. They have to be on the same network. But to verify that, just grab Packet Tracer, lab it up, put two neighbors together, put the mask on first, the correct one, have them agree, and then change the mask and see if the neighborship blows up. And if it does, you'll know your answer. That's exact. You know what? Gosh golly. I've got a CLI and I'm not afraid to use it. Let's do it. Because this is the coaching I would give to you. And since I've got the gear right here, why not do it? My guess is they won't form neighborships or won't like it. So currently I've got in this topology, EIGRP is running, and I've got R6 and R8. They're at 10. Let's just check them out. Let's see what they are. Okay, so R7, I am on the wrong side of the network. So here's R8. We'll do a show IP interface brief and show IP route. That's going to show us the masks. Oh, hold on a second. Show IP route connected. That's one way of seeing the masks and everything in one fell swoop. The L routes. So I've got the off of fast Ethernet 4/1. I've got the 10.2.68.0. And it has the last octet of 8. So if I just change that by 1, that'll do it. So config T interface fast Ethernet 4/1. Oh my gosh. Okay, here we go. Do show IP EIGRP neighbors. So I want to make sure I have a neighborship. Okay, so I currently have a neighborship. Life is good. And on that interface, I'm going to do an IP address 10.2.68.8, and I'll put on 255.255.255.128. I'm just going to mess up the mask by 1 bit. Yeah. Oh, wow. Look at that. Show IP EIGRP neighbor. Look at that. I wouldn't have guessed that. I would have guessed they would have barked. But let me just do a double check here. Show IP interface for FA 4/1. Just want to look at the details. So yeah, it's got a 25-bit mask, and those EIGRP neighbors are still up. I'm so glad I labbed that up. All right, there you go. Ospf, it wouldn't tolerate that for 1 nanosecond. I'm going to keep an eye on this while we chat. But it looked like they dropped the neighborship, reestablished the neighborship, and they're okay with that. And if we did a show CD, yeah, and R6 for sure has a /24-bit mask. All right, good to know. Wow, that's fantastic. Thanks for that exercise. Yeah, I wouldn't have guessed that. That would not have been my guess with the EIGRP. Fantastic. All right, so that goes out to, who was that? That was Omar. Thank you. So the answer is, at least with a 24 and a 25-bit mask, which is different, they're okay. So maybe, so now I'm curious. Maybe in the negotiation, they're looking at each other's IP address, but they don't send the mask information. And as a result, that works. So that's something that we could dive into and look at if you're, not for CCNA, but just out of curiosity, because I'm curious. All right, next question. Thank you for that. This is Himanshu asking, after CCNP route switch, should I do Palo Alto or CCNA security? So all the CCNAs except for the one final CCNA that got replaced in February 24th, 2020, that's the only CCNA. So as far as CCNA security or CCNA wireless or CCNA data center or CCNA cloud or CCNA whatever, those are all gone. You can't test on those anymore. So if you get after you get your CCNP for route switch, if you want to start pursuing security at the professional level, that would be an idea, or Checkpoint or Palo Alto or whatever vendor you feel would be most valuable to you in your career wherever you are in the world. So if I was looking at jobs and every one of them said, you need Palo Alto experience, I would probably focus on Palo Alto if that's where I wanted to be. Or if they wanted firepower experience, which is Cisco's product, I would focus on that. So I'd say it depends on what you are interested in, and also if you're at a company, if you're currently working, and they currently have gear like firepower or Checkpoint or Palo Alto, maybe tackle those first because you have somebody in-house that can help you or give you insights, and you can actually have questions that you can ask because you have the product that's really there. I've discovered that if I study something really hard, which I often do for like 45 to 60 days at a time, and then I go on to the next topic, I forget a lot. I do. I forget a lot if I haven't touched a technology in like a year or two or 3 or 4 years. Like HP, I used to be a master certified HP person. And I used to really know HP and the different models and the different differences between the differences between the various CLIs based on where they came from, who wrote the code for the HP platform. And it's been so many years, I would have to refresh on that before I worked on it again. So if you can work on something or study something that you're likely to use, it's always better than if you're studying something that you probably won't touch for many, many years. Okay. Dan. Hey, welcome back, Dan. And everybody else. Great to have you here. How did I run this lab? Just curious. Okay, so in the last session, we did Packet Tracer. And I use Packet Tracer for many things, including wireless and other gear. I also use Viral. I have a license for Viral that I use personally when I want to lab up something that's going to require more oomph and more features. And then GNS3, I grew up on GNS3 over the last 12, however long it's been now, 8, 10 years. Big fan of GNS3, except the problem with GNS3 is that you have to be like an expert in GNS3. It's like, I'm trying to merge this to the outside world, and Microsoft changes their firewall default behavior on a Windows machine, and now it won't connect, and this won't connect, this service doesn't come up, and then people are getting iOS images that are iffy or laden with malware. Not the actual images themselves, but in their searches to try to find that software. So, and EVNG is another solution as well. I would say if you are a Cisco, if you're going for a CCNP, when the new Viral comes out, which is going to be Viral 2.0, it's in beta. People have the beta. I'm aware of people who have the beta. When it comes out, I'm sure it's going to be a lot more streamlined to use. It's $200 a year. That's a Cisco license. I would recommend that for anybody at the professional level and on. And then for the automation and some of those things, the DevNet Sandbox and dcloud are going to be very helpful as well, so you don't have to buy Nexus switches and so forth. Although there is quite a bit of support, a little bit of support for many of those things inside of Viral. So I would encourage a brand new person, if you're a CCNA, get Packet Tracer. I'm going to do several more videos and also troubleshooting labs with Packet Tracer because I want you to feel comfortable in logging on, labbing it up, and using it. Now, just as a heads up, for summarization, I thought to myself, this is last night, doing a live stream tomorrow, so I might as well announce that to everybody. So I haven't been feeling great. I feel good. I feel pretty good right now. So I finally did my announcement on social media about this live stream, and thank you for everybody who's here. And I thought to myself, what if I lab this all up in Packet Tracer? And then I supplied that Packet Tracer file, and then they could actually do the summarization. And I discovered that a lot of the summarization commands for ASBRs and interfaces with EIGRP don't exist. So they're not really focused on summarization and implementing it in various topologies everywhere it's possible to do on real gear and Packet Tracer. So I abandoned that idea, and I just used this demo instead because I wanted to get the concept of it. And in the blueprint for CCNA, there is no heavy, I don't recall any heavy lifting or even strong knowledge regarding summarization that you have to be responsible for. But for the real world, you need to know it. And part of our Subnet Saturdays, I wanted to include it. Hopefully that answered your question, Dan. And also, Dan, I appreciate all the support and feedback and ideas you've had on Discord as well. You rock. All right. A few other questions. So 127, this is from Darshan. A 127 address is, so Class A, B, and C address. Class A goes through 1 through 127 if you look at the binary. 127, anything is reserved as a local loopback or a loopback. Not like a loopback interface, which is a layer 3 interface, but rather a loopback address that cannot be routed. So if you have like a computer, if you said ping 127.0.0 anything, it thinks it's itself. Oh, it's me. And an IPv6, it's : : 1. That's what a loopback is. And Dasher, regarding your LSVP route, you can put that in the other section if you would. I like your persistence though, Darshan. It's great. I'm going to ask one more about something outside the scope of CCNA and see if Keith goes for it. I do appreciate you. I do. All right. Let's see here. I like the tenacity. I watched Fight Club yesterday. I wasn't feeling great, so I just took a sick day from work, and I watched Fight Club, and it's a trippy movie. I'm not sure why I just thought of it. Something in that comment triggered that for Fight Club. I also watched RoboCop, the original RoboCop, and the animation they had, it was from a long time ago. It's kind of fun to watch. All right, Dan is back on topic. Dan is asking, can you please get our hands dirty? Can you do one more example of PT of how you did? Yeah, Dan, absolutely. Dan's asking, can we do more on packet tracer and giving you content you can download or set up from the ground up, either way. And I will. I was going to do it today, but the summarization and the ASBR and some of those features just didn't come through, didn't work. And so I said, okay, it's time to change gears and go to something. But I will, whenever it's possible, whenever it makes the best sense for learning and where I can demo what I want to teach, I will start incorporating packet tracer more and more. Thank you very much. All right, can you please, Dan is asking about access points without a controller. So some access points will work in lightweight access mode, which means they need a controller, and other access points can be configured as autonomous access points. And when I did this, in fact, let me show you something from the what do you call it, time machine. Hold on. So this little box is labeled network devices. And these are devices I don't use all the time, but I've got that's an ASA, that's a Palo Alto PA200, just a little guy. Here we go. Give me one moment. Never throw anything away is not great advice, but keeping stuff that you might need someday is. So these are some access points that I purchased used 4-5 years ago when I did the CCNA wireless course at CBT Nuggets. It's still in the library, so the way that library works, it's a paid subscription, it's not free, but people who have a paid membership, they get full access to the entire library. So it's VMware, Cisco, Palo Alto, Checkpoint, all that cool stuff. And when I did the CCNA wireless, I bought these. So I used a virtual controller. So I downloaded I think it was an eval from Cisco. So I had a virtual controller running in VMware. And then I had 3 of these guys. Oh yeah, here's his name. I didn't even see that. The focus isn't cooperating with me. This is Access Point 1, AP1. And this is an old one. This is a LAP 1131AG. It's ancient. So, but this one, the reason I got this one at the time, it was like $15, $20 on eBay because it was used. But it supports lightweight access point mode where it works with a controller, or it boots up, gets the IP address from a DHCP server of the wireless LAN controller, connects, downloads a config via TFTP, and away it goes. I think it's TFTP. Anyway, you can also wipe this out and connect to it directly. And I still remember what I did. So here's has the port for power, and then there's a port for the Ethernet cable. And then there's also, you can do power over Ethernet. So I had a power over Ethernet switch as well. And I still remember what I did to configure one of these. In answer to the question from Dan, is I just went to the online doc. I went to the online doc for this model, and it just walked me through it. Here's how you boot this as a standalone autonomous access point. And here's how you configure the DHCP server to go ahead and make it managed by a controller. And then during the videos, what I did was I had to somehow simulate degradation from one AP to another so that the client would connect to the strongest signal. So I had pots and pans. I didn't have a Faraday cage. A Faraday cage is a device that basically traps all the Wi-Fi signals and doesn't let them escape. I didn't have a Faraday cage, so I used a pot. And I got out of the kitchen a big pot, and I simply put it on top of it, and I raised it up a little bit so it'd be very hard because metal, it doesn't allow radio frequency to go through it very well. It was a lot of fun. So that's what I would do. I would take the access point you're interested in and go to the Cisco Online Doc for that model. And not everyone will support lightweight access mode or autonomous mode, so you'd want to do the research. This is the K9, so I think the K9 means enterprise or has encryption. Anyway, I don't remember now, but I looked it up, and then I went forward. Same thing I do with most technologies that I do today. I just go to the online doc from Cisco. How do they want me to configure it? Is there a command line option? What is it? How do I clear the config? So documentation is amazing. And then once you do it 2 or 3 times, you become very good at it. And I haven't done that for like 4 years, so I don't remember off the top of my head, but that model, it's possible. All right, moving forward. All right. Hamzix, welcome. You're asking, why don't you do streams and vids on advanced networking and security, wireless security, and etc. So I've been on YouTube since 2009, which means I've been here a while. I'm 55. I look a little younger sometimes, but I'm 55. My birthday's coming up. Oh, by the way, that's my birthday's on the 26th. No gifts. But so my birthday's in like 12 days, and we are very close to 100,000 subscribers. So I believe, based on the current rate, there's like maybe 2,000 to 3,000 people a month that are joining us here for training. So the word's getting out. I appreciate you putting the word out and letting people know, hey, if you're getting your CCNA, you'd want to check out this free playlist from Keith. So that's great. Getting back to this. Network Chuck, who's fantastic. I work with him at CBT Nuggets. I used to say he works with me, but now I say I work with him. He's great. And I've learned a lot of tips as I've gotten better and better. I got a better camera, and I've gone to 1080p for the live stream because it's better for many environments. And I've also I make changes almost every week, little changes based on feedback to make this a better experience and fun and make it useful. And one of the things that I think is really important, if you're going into YouTube or you're going into streaming, this isn't my career, right? My career is CBT Nuggets. I do this because I want to give something back. I want to make it useful, and I want the world to change. One person at a time, talking to you. One person at a time. Commit, schedule the time, make a difference, pass it on. So I want to make a difference. And as far as the focus, one of the things I've learned as I've studied, I looked at these people who are making the differences, is that they are very focused. They know their audience. And so this audience involves a lot of people who already have their CCNAs. I get that, and I love it. I'm so glad you're back to, hang out and to help moderate Discord and help answer questions and so forth. It's fantastic. But there are also a lot of people, and the number is growing by thousands every month, who are working on their CCNA. They want to know, hey, how does this work? And in this format, we have the opportunity to help move them forward in their careers and get them past the CCNA. I expect everybody to be using multiple sources, like maybe some paid content somewhere, or maybe a paid book somewhere, a few different YouTube channels that work for them. And I find that a lot of people find it, based on feedback, like, the light just went off. The light bulb just went off. Went on. Sorry. Freudian slip. Now it's dark. The light bulb just went on, and it makes sense. And there's a chance to discuss it and articulate and think about this and see it from a different angle and hear somebody who's been in the business for 20 years with Cisco talking about their perspective of it. And if Keith can do it, anybody can do it. All those things. And the focal point is, in being successful with a channel like this, it needs to be very, very focused. So if people, I'll tell you what, you could do this on your own. If you bring up a browser and you bring it up in like incognito mode, or where it doesn't have all your cookies and history, and you do a search on YouTube for 200-301, we come up. We come up in the top 4 or 5 hits of that. And that is my goal. I want to make sure that people can find us. They know what we're doing. They know we're here to help. We're not monetizing anything. We are here to help them succeed. And so by having that focus, it's just as clear. Other individuals, even though I'm fairly new at this whole streaming game and getting better all the time with your feedback, thank you very much and all your help. I get questions about, okay, what do I need to do differently, or what should I start doing? And one of my first questions is, if somebody was to look at like 5 of your videos, your current ones, like my old videos, I am all over the board with technology, like private VLANs, VPNs, MPLS, it's just, so going back a few years, it's just a smattering of technologies, including a lot of security. But in the last year, and focusing now going forward, I want to make sure this is CCNA. So I'd ask them, if somebody saw your channel and they watched 5 or 10 of your videos back to back and they looked at it, what would they think your channel's about? And if they say, well, I don't know, I'd say, well, that's part of the problem. We're sending out a clear message on this channel. CCNA, we want to help. CCNA, we want to get better. And even as a CCIE, when I watch other people's CCNA content, and I still do, I watch live streams, I read books, I often learn something brand new, or something that I've forgotten that makes my fundamental skills even better. So All right, that's me getting off my soapbox. Off. All right. Scrolling up. Thanks for the question. All right. Himanshu's asking Himanshu's asking, welcome. How many hours do you work every day on learning? Great question. I am a little bit of a procrastinator, as many people have been at points in their life. Not you now, hopefully, but like I have Cisco Live coming up, if it still happens based on the Corona thing, but it's scheduled for June. And as part of that, I have a deadline. I'm teaching 2 workshops that both involve SDN. So I've been spending 2 or 3 hours a week, not a day, but 2 or 3 hours a week studying SDN and how network automation, network programming, and so forth to get better and better at it. So I would say that maybe when I was studying for my first CCIE back in like 2000, my first CCIE was in 2001 when I got it. I studied almost 8 months, 4 to 5 days a week, and about 4 hours a day. And that was alongside of a full-time job. So it depends on where you're at, what you're learning. The key is set a goal, measure that goal. And okay, one of the things that really helps me is to make a commitment. Like I've committed to this channel that I'm taking my DevNet associate, which is the question one for me. The CCNA exam I'm not worried about, but the DevNet, I have to keep studying to make sure I can pass that and understand it. That's my goal, is to understand it first and then to pass the exam, demonstrating my knowledge. And I've committed to both of those before Cisco Live, whether it happens or not, whatever that week in June is. I think it's the first week in June. My commitment is to get it done. So committing that to a few people, a friend or two like you, is helpful and makes me on the spot, gives me a little added pressure to get that stuff done. Also, last year, I had a goal to get to 15% body fat by the end, or by what we call Trainer Palooza at CBT Nuggets. We all get together, we gather in Oregon and have a great time. And, we talk about things. How's it going? What can we do better? We motivate each other. And basically, it's a team building exercise for all the trainers at CBT Nuggets. Quite a hoot. Jeremy Chara, Network Chuck, Knox Hutchinson, Jeff Kish, Jacob, and the rest. They're all great. Simona, they're all great. So my commitment from last year, and I'm running out of time, it is March 14th right now, was to get to 10% body fat by Trainer Palooza, which is by second week of June, which effectively means before Cisco Live as well, 10%. So I had a couple months of illness, not steady illness, but I've had a little bit of illness, and I'm thinking right now, there's no time left. I'm not going to wait until the end of May to say, oh no, I better start cramming now. With diet and exercise and tracking what I eat and doing those things which I know I need to do, I can't cram those, just like we shouldn't try to cram a CCNA. It's just not good. Steady as she goes. So what I'm doing now is I have a food tracker. Not fun, but I do it because I know it's going to be in my best interest. I track everything that goes in this body, food-wise. And then I also am tracking my exercise, my cardio, and my strength training. I'm 55. I'm not lifting the house. I'm lifting very moderate weights. But I got to do it, and I got to do it now. So the fact, this right here, let me see if I can get you a shot of that. Oh, good thing I brushed my teeth this morning. All right, that necklace is a quarter from Oregon. I was up for a trainer thing in CBT Nuggets, where we were headquarters in Eugene, Oregon. And they're at the fair, this open market rather, they had these quarters that they carve out different things, cats and dinosaurs and whatever. But and this necklace, it says "to it" twice. It's a round to it. And my challenge for you, my call to action for each one of us is, let's identify something in our life that we need to do. Something that we know we should do. It would be better for us if we did it. And let's get around to it and get it done. And part of the secret is I read a book probably twice a year, same book, called Atomic Habits by James Clear. Great book about he's not all about the end goal. He's about systems. Like if you're not reaching your goals, it's very likely your systems are terrible. Like, okay, what am I going to do if I'm in this situation? What's your system for getting out of that? Or what's your system if you feel like plopping down? This is me talking to myself. What is my system if I feel like plopping down on my recliner, my lazy boy, which is my hypnosis chair, by the way. I'm a certified hypnotist, for many of you know that already. Anyway, what's my strategy if I want to plop down the hypnosis chair with a bunch of food and just binge watch mindless TV? What's my strategy? And if I don't have a strategy, and at the end of the day, if I'm tired, that could happen. I'm not saying it does all the time, but I'm saying it's happened before. So having strategies on small goals, like don't focus on, I'm going to get my CCIE by 2022, but rather I'm going to focus studied effort for at least 2 days a week, a half hour a day. Then measure those goals. Are you doing it? Commit to others. Let other people know. So my goal for June is still 10% body fat, which is, now I've committed it. I've talked to people about that before. Now you know, and it's up to me to get it done. So this is another day with no hair product for me. I got in the shower 15 minutes before. I want to look nice for you. So I got in the shower 15 minutes before the live stream. Then knowing I have that time pressure, is like, I got to get back here and hit the button to start the live stream. So I'm glad you're here. And there's still numbers going up. So glad you're here. Oh, Murray, thanks for asking. Murray's asking, how's the cat? The cat, the procedure was a neutering operation for this cat. And his name is Sparky. He seems like he could care less. I don't need those. So he didn't even, I mean, we supposed not to really have him jump around and stuff first couple days, but he's just a go-getter. He likes being held. We have 3 cats. We have 2 black cats and 1 Sparky. His name is Spartacus, but we call him Sparky for short. And this cat likes being held, likes playing, meets me at the door. Well, the other cats are like, hey, the garage door is opening. Let's hide. So Sparky is doing great. Murray, thanks for asking. All right, another question. Doing a quick time check. We have plenty of time. All right. HJAFEREY 255 is stating, in my job, we often have to have our customers do summarization because for IPsec they cannot have multiple encryption domains, SPIs, security parameter indexes, so that, okay. You're welcome. Awesome. It was just a thank you. You're very, very welcome. I'm glad you're here. Tell your friends about the CCNA Master Playlist if they're looking at getting into Cisco and learning the networking fundamentals. Would be great. All right, Murray responded and said, I'm using one of my wireless network AIR LAP 1131 AGE K9s as a wireless access point. Awesome. Thank you. And I think I just lost my place. Hold on a second. Okay, there we go. There's Dinesh is asking about LSVP routes. If you put that in the Discord server, I'd be happy to elaborate on it there for you. All right. Ibrahim, and I apologize if my pronunciation isn't as good as it should be. I am so glad that everyone's here, even if my pronunciation is lacking. That's totally on me. Ibrahim is asking, what about network address increment? Many thanks. So, Ibrahim, we have one of our videos in the Subnet Saturdays playlist. I mean, a separate playlist just for subnetting and from the ground up. And one of those is on block size with increments. And as you go through those, you'll hit that one. And if you still have a question about block size, that would probably answer it for you. And then after you work more with IP addresses and you see a bunch of networks, sometimes you can eyeball it and say, oh, those are all probably in the 64 block of addresses. And that can help you get quicker to your summarization. I wanted to make sure that anybody could take it to binary, identify where the demarc is for a summarized route, so you could do it if you had to on an exam or if you had to answer a question about that, you could do it. But it becomes easier the more you practice. All right, Darshan, you are very welcome. And Adrian saying happy birthday. Thank you very much. 56, yay! I went to the store this morning and it was one of those warehouse type stores, and there was a few things that were out, but most things were in, and also people were calm, and it's good to have a little bit of measured, washing our hands, often, and not touching our faces until we washed our hands. All those things are good ideas. But thank you for the happy birthdays. Rodrigo, thank you for those comments as well. All right, Demetrio is stating, thank you so much for your insight. How could we switch from router to router in Packet Tracer? What to use to change and make selection for a different router so quick? Great. So in Packet Tracer, when you click on, I don't have it open at the moment, but when you click on a device, it brings up that window for it. And as you click on additional windows, it brings all those up separately. So if you look at your taskbar, at least in Windows, it'll have separate items for each one of those entries. So if you have 8 routers, you can just click on the bottom link and just router 1, router 2, router 3. What I'm using here is called, it's free. It's I think it's MT Putty. So Putty is a free terminal emulator. It supports a lot of things, including SSH and Telnet and serial connections. And it's my go-to for a free terminal emulator. And this MT Putty is just a shell, free, that lets you put multiple tabs on one screen. So if there is an option, and I haven't looked into this, if there's an option to use an external terminal emulator to connect into Packet Tracer, you could use something like MT Putty and have all the tabs lined up. What I did in this case is I spent weeks in building lab environments for CBT Nuggets so that when a student is learning about whatever it is we're teaching, they could focus on the actual commands and syntax as opposed to jumping around and having to go, oh, where's this one? Where's that one? I wanted to reduce the friction as much as possible to make it easy for people to learn. So I'm using MT Putty in this environment here that's talking to all those devices. And that can be true for emulators like EVE-NG, GNS3, you can do that. With Viral, I just used their built-in console. I don't have anything external set up for Viral, but you can integrate Viral with the real world as well. Okay, Angela is saying, I tried in Packet Tracer to associate SSID for each VLAN created, but I could not. Is it required for CCNA? First of all, 2 thumbs way, way up for looking at the, a technology, labbing it up and taking the efforts and steps to actually learn it. So if you got to the part where you're trying to map a VLAN to an individual SSID, which is a real thing. Maybe you have a guest VLAN, a guest wireless network, and you want to map it to a certain VLAN just for guests. That would be important. Let me get the blueprint. So section 2.2.x in the blueprint says, this is 2.9, configure the components of a wireless LAN access for client connectivity using the GUI only. Huh, interesting. Such as wireless LAN creation, security settings, QoS profiles, and advanced wireless LAN settings. Those represent those 4 tabs under the profile for the wireless LAN network. So if Packet Tracer doesn't support the actual mapping of a VLAN to an individual SSID or a profile, I would say that you could probably do a quick Google search, just look at that, at where it's done, or look at the documentation, say, yeah, I get how I would do that. But based on what that blueprint says, I don't think the individual mapping, again, I have not seen the exam yet that's coming up for me, but I would think that the mapping from an SSID to an individual VLAN probably beyond the scope of, but again, I haven't seen it and I don't know. But I would say if you're interested in that, just look at the official doc for the wireless LAN controller and look at those steps, and then you'll know how to do it. Even if Packet Tracer doesn't support it, you'll be most of the way there. Oh, and Murray had a similar issue with the SSIDs. I'll take another look too, by the way. I'll take another look and see if I can't. Oh, if I had 2 people that tried it, it wasn't there, probably just not supported. All right. Dan is asking, how did you start working at CBT Nuggets? So Jeremy Chara and I have been work associates for, it seems like 15 years, 18 years. We worked together at a place called Mastering Computers, or maybe it was KnowledgeNet, way long time ago. So we've known each other for a long time, and about 10 years ago, they chatted with me about creating some content for them. I was, at the time, I had a top secret clearance. I don't anymore, and I know nothing. Don't blackmail me for anything. I have no knowledge, no access anymore. So I had a top secret clearance. I was happy with my work, and so I wasn't interested in pursuing teaching at that time full time. I'd already started making videos for YouTube. That was like 2009-ish, 2010. And then they came back to me about a year or 2 later and said, hey, we're doing these things called micro nuggets. They're like 5 minutes long. We'll pay you X dollars for each micro nugget. It won't take away from your full-time job. So I said, yeah, I'll do it. I got permission from my boss at the time, who said, yeah, go ahead. So I made those, and then they said, well, we have this other Network Plus course. Back then, it was like 9 years ago. And they said, we have the Network Plus course. You think you could do that as a contractor? So I talked to my boss, and he said, I don't know. I said, well, if you don't let me do it, I need to move on. And so he goes, yeah, you can do it. It'll work. So I created that content, Network Plus, before I worked full-time. And then about I think it was either halfway through it. My mind gets a little fuzzy at that point. Halfway through that, they had what was called, at that time, they didn't have full-time trainers. They had people that worked for CBT Nuggets, but they weren't full-time employees. And they wanted to start that process. And so I was in Oregon. They flew me up for meeting the company. We were like 50 to 60 people at that time. Now we're much larger. And just chatted with them, had a good time, met with the teams, talked with them. Really great culture, great atmosphere. Their interest is, the heart's in the right place. They want the best thing for the learner. Having a flat model, we're subscription-based, but access to the whole catalog. We need our content to be really good and effective. So about an hour before I was supposed to catch my flight, the owner met with me and said, hey, how do you like CBT Nuggets? And I said, that's great. What a great company. I'm so happy to work here as a contractor and make some videos. And then he just made me an offer that I took. That was it. So he made me the offer, and I said, well, I've got all these other things going. He made me this offer, and I said I need to check with my wife, which I did, which is always a good idea, by the way. Give you time to think and also to check with your significant other, whoever that may be. And I called him back, I think, the next day. I said I would love nothing more. And then I had like a month of contract work that I was doing with my previous company. So we had to finish those contracts and make sure they were all done and buttoned up. Also, at the same time, I was doing some videos for Cisco. That's where the nuts and bolts of networking came from. They flew me out, and that was like, I guess it was 2011. And I filmed, and they had a camera crew, and I taught IP networking and the fun. I think they call it the nuts and bolts of networking is what we called it. Anyway. So I took the full-time job in 2012, August, with CBT Nuggets, and never looked back. It's been great. So they've encouraged us to keep our social presence up. And over the last 10 years, I've been, releasing a few videos and some micro nuggets. But I've really, with Chuck Keith's motivation, like how well he's doing in changing people and helping people, Chuck Keith, Network Chuck, I think I could do better. And that's what I've done. It's just upping my game a little bit and promoting content from CBT Nuggets as I go, not really as a commercial, but people know. I mean, people know they can find me at CBT Nuggets. So everything here on YouTube is geared to be on topic, a little longer than our CBT Nuggets, which are normally 5 to 15 minutes each, and focused here on YouTube, focused to be free. So anybody can improve and change and grow. So Dan, thanks for that question. That's my short history of me and CBT Nuggets. And then Murray's saying, I remember a comment I made some time ago saying to build a network that your family uses and then you have to make it work. I don't know if I said it enough, but that sounds great. That sounds like if you have a family and they require internet access and you're building a network at the house and then you put it in or you change over. That might have been me, actually. I think that's when I was learning Palo Alto. I swapped in the Palo Alto PA200 firewall instead of the generic home router, our home router. So the PA is doing firewall services, application layer services. I had a license for it at the time. So right now it's not licensed anymore. It's just a box until I license it again. But I had to basically go in and say, oh, these firewall rules, they aren't working. Why not? So I had a gamer in the house at the time, and my game's not working. Okay, I'll figure it out. So that was a crash course on application layer services. So thanks for remembering that. I'd forgotten that, but that's certainly what do you call it? Baptism by fire type of thing, where you got to make it work. Okay, going down. And this is Hamzix again. Thank you for your help. I'm still learning from you and many others, but I wanted to say that CCNA is the first step, and everyone here should have more advanced knowledge. Yes, CCNA is a baseline. It is a baseline. That's okay. So the next goal that we have might be to others a stepping stone. And I remember when I got my CCI, my first CCI, me and Ed Yanez, we studied together for like 8 months. And he was in Arizona, I was in Nevada. We studied, we were study buddies. We had racks of equipment, each of us. And we motivated and pushed each other on. We both passed on our first attempt on the 2-day lab back in 2001, January 6th, I think. Those are my plaques down there, by the way. One is for route switch, one's for security. And so here, back to that point. So when I got my CCIE, I was really happy, right? Like euphoric. Ed Yanez and I was hugging him outside, crying like a baby. Because like all that work, right? All that time. And we did it. I mean, there's like 12 people that walked in and like 3 or 4 people that walked out passing. And he and I were 2 of those. And so I remember, though, that next week, I realized what I didn't know. Because once you start learning a topic, like let's say it's biology or some aspect of science, and you start studying that area, you start to realize, oh, there's all these other things that I have no knowledge about. And that's what I felt. my first week of after being a CCI. I was super happy, don't get that wrong. But then I started realizing there's so much more I don't know. And the same thing is for CCNA. It's a stepping stone. And so is the CCI. CCI is not an end goal in itself. It's a goal to learn at a certain level, an expert level, about some fixed technologies, whether it's enterprise routing and switching or security or whatever the focus is for your IE. And then it's to start to use those and get better and better and keep on learning. And that's what Cisco wants us to do too. They want us to keep on learning. Yep. So Hamnix, I totally agree with you. Stepping stones. And you take one stepping stone and you just keep on going and keep on going and keep on going. All right, looking for my name still. Okay, so my playlist for CCNA on YouTube is, let me just post it. Excuse the side of the head for a moment as I copy this. I'm just going to paste it into the chats. So that's the full YouTube playlist and so here's how that works. I create live stream. We create live streams, and I'm leaving on the Q&A at the end now. I used to cut those off. So they were usually an hour or more of Q&A like this afterwards, and people found them. Well, people gave me good feedback and saying, you know what, those are useful. Let's keep those, and so I keep them now, and that's the playlist right there. ogit.online. OGIT is the original gangster of IT. I had a family member help me create that. And then the /sloth is the master playlist. There's a separate one for Subnet Saturdays. It is ogit.online/Subnet. And you can also just go to Keith Barker. And I also have those playlists very high up in the output so you can find them easily. So thank you very much for that request for that URL. All right. And Oma's saying, many years since I watched your training at CBT Nuggets for CCNA. Now I'm working in a job that I need to use that knowledge. Great refresher. Thanks. Awesome. That is so good. Because again, we learn things and we leave it, and then we come back and sometimes it's great for a refresher. So glad to have you here. Just want to hang out and help other people and refresh on how things work. That's great. I have a friend who works, he works for one of the major 6 companies in the world of IT. He works as a technician, and his biggest, it felt like a complaint, but the biggest observation I'll say was that he studied all this information about routing and switching and everything else and configuring routing protocols and access control lists and network address translation and trunking and spanning tree and all these other things. And then in his job, he doesn't get to actually use any of that. And I said to him, that's okay. The training and the knowledge there, you know why they hire, I think this is I don't know who said this quote. So I can't attribute it to the right person. It wasn't me, but they said, do you know why some companies pay CCIEs to do switch rack and stacks where they're putting switches, racking them, and getting them all set up? It's not because it takes a CCIE level to do it. It's because when something goes terribly wrong, the CCIE has the background and the fundamental knowledge to say, okay, what's happening? Why is it happening? Identify what's happening and then correct it. So the expertise comes in when you need that knowledge, not on everyday activities. So most companies aren't going to ask you to redesign their network ever. It's just going to be adding on and adding on and adding on. All right. All right, Angela's asking, what is the ornament that rotates near the lamp behind you? Let me bring it up. Hang on. So I'm going to borrow an ASA to raise this up. This is a little ASA 5505. It's old. Okay. I'll let my camera try to figure that one out. Focus. Whoa, where should I focus? So I watched, I think it was one of the Ironmans I saw. And one of the Marvel comics, I think it was Iron Man. And they had something like this, a bigger one, like on this desk. And I was just like, wow, what is that? How does it work? And so I did some searching on Amazon. Searching wasn't that hard. It took like 5 minutes. And then I found this. And it uses 4 AA batteries in the bottom. There's a magnetic piece on one of these that as it whips back the bottom, or on the bottom side, it gets enough of a boost to keep going. So 4 batteries will have this going for maybe 2 months without any type of interaction. As you focus on that moving bar and listening to my voice and sleep. Oh, hypnosis is so fun. So the one thing I learned about hypnosis, and many of you know that I am a certified hypnotist, and I'll give you the short scoop on that, really short, is that I had a really, well, I'll give you the even shorter version. I was curious about 8 years ago, and so I went to a show, and I thought, I'm really curious, is this real, or are they doing, what's really going on? So I paid for this 4-day course by this professional stage performer named Mark Savard. If you come to Vegas after the pandemic's over and you want to see a hypnotist, he's the one to see. He's so great. And he had this 4-day class. I went to it. I was an IT guy, like everybody's introducing themselves. On my right was this anesthesiologist from New Zealand or Australia. And I know there's 2 different places, but I can't remember which. And then to my left, there's a guy who performed at county fairs, doing magic tricks, and he was going to incorporate a hypnosis show. And I was like, what am I getting into? And so here's what I learned. There was a Java programmer named Corey Osborne, and I glommed onto him and, okay, Corey, what's going on with all this stuff? Is it real? Are people pretending? How's it work? He says, well, I've helped people with smoking cessation, stopping smoking for years, hundreds of clients. And I thought, can you hypnotize me? Because I'd really like to kind of get a feel for it. And so he did. He goes, yeah, next break, we'll just take you off into a corner. And even though I knew the techniques, which is mostly overload, he did it. And when I came out of that, I was like, oh, I get it. So here's the straight scoop. 50% of what you see on TV and movies is fake. Ta-da! Okay. So what is true, though, is that when people are in a hypnotic state, which we go through many times a day just on our own, we basically have an internal focus, and we have a hyper focus almost. And with the hypnotist, if we're willing, we have to be willing. People are not going to go against their belief system. If they don't want to get in a certain condition on stage, they're not going to get in a certain. And if somebody doesn't want to stop smoking, they're not going to stop smoking. So in a therapeutic sense, I'm not a certified hypnotherapist. I'm a master hypnotist. The difference is 200 hours of observed time doing hypnotherapy. But anyway, long story short, it's hyper-focus, it's relaxing the critical factor, and you're not going to disagree. You're not going to buy into anything you don't want to buy into. But it's super helpful. I mean, super helpful. And yeah. And people are not asleep, and they're not zombies. They look like zombies. And it's a little scary for somebody who's like, I remember I had my daughter and a friend of hers. My daughter's over 30. And I have several children. This one was over 30, and she had a friend with her, and her friend wanted to try it out. And I thought, okay, here we go. And so I did a formal hypnosis session for her friend, and we talked about beforehand, like what it would feel like and what it would experience, and what would you like to work on or change or tweak. And based on all that, my daughter was a little bit, not freaked out, but like, oh, is she okay? Because they look, when somebody is like, we call it the hypnotic mask, when they are in trance, meaning they're super focused and they're listening to every word and they're visualizing in their mind, they're going a mile a minute. And our goal as a hypnotist is to help them on their journey of what they want to resolve. So for PTSD and for serious conditions like that, you'd want to go to a certified hypnotherapist. But for things like, hey, I want to manage my eating or have better health, or I want to stop smoking, a certified hypnotist can help with that if they have practice. All right, so I don't know how we got talking about hypnosis. Oh, it was that bar going back and forth. So a watch or a finger or focusing on a spot on the wall or any of those techniques can work. Any of them. And so in a pinch, I'll tell you what I do too is if I talk to somebody about hypnosis and I explain some techniques that I use for a willing participant who wants to go into hypnotic state, I won't use the same technique I tell them about. That's part of the hypnotic secret. If you give them what they're expecting, it won't be as easy for them to go into a hypnotic state. So afterwards, I did one recently, and she said, because I explained how it works and how you can hear every word, you're not sleeping, and da-da-da-da. And then afterwards, she goes, all that stuff you told me about how you get people in a hypnotic state, you didn't do. I said, I know. There's more than one just trick in the book for that. And if you're prepared for it, your conscious mind is like, oh, he's doing this, and now he's doing this. Where the biggest thing about hypnosis is overload. Overload. You're just overloading the conscious processing, and your subconscious is so much better at all these patterns, and you're basically trying to overload the conscious mind so that the subconscious can, it's still you, but your subconscious is part of your brain. So it's fun. Like if I get somebody who's really good with math, I will ask them to freaking remember 5 numbers that are, 2 of them are odd, 3 are even in one sequence. When you have those numbers in your mind, repeat them. And I'm not remembering those numbers. I just want to keep their conscious mind busy with something so that we can get past that and get right to the hypnotic state. All right. Yeah, this is not a hypnosis channel. Although I did discover that there's nothing supernatural about hypnosis. It's just a natural state. And most good advertisers are using hypnosis. Yeah. So if you're aware of that, you'd be less suggestible to various things if you want to be. All right. I want to share my knowledge as you do, but I don't have time to stream as my study day. Is there anything I can do to manage my time? Here's what I do. To manage my time. Let me see if I can find a blank one for you. I don't have a blank one, and I have one that's written out, but I don't want to share that with you. I don't want to share. I have, I use a piece of paper. I print it out, and I sometimes for paper, having physical, tangible paper is good. I also use an iPad for a lot of digital, but I simply write out all the stuff I need to do that day or that week, and then I prioritize it with a ranking of 1 to 3, 3 being high, 1 being low, and 2 columns. One is short-term urgency. How soon do I have to get this done? Let me give you an example. Might be the rent. If it's the last day of the month and rent is due on the last day of the month or the first day of the month, the urgency would be a 3. That's how I rank it. And then if it's something that's not too urgent, that would be a lower number. Then I have another column that says long-term importance to me. So studying, guess what? Short-term urgency, if I haven't procrastinated, may be kind of low, but the long-term importance of me studying for that 30 minutes or 45 minutes a day is really important. The deal is a person is rarely, see, I'm not going to say you because as a hypnotist, that's putting that suggestion on you. So a person over here who wants to get a whole bunch of stuff done or needs to get a whole bunch of stuff done is probably not going to get everything done. So what that person could do is prioritize and say, okay, I'm only going to work on my A priorities. That's the highest combination between short-term urgency and long-term importance. Maybe that's a 6. I take all my 6s and those are all A's. And that's all I'm going to do. Focus on my A's. If those are done, then you go to B's. And the next day when you look at it, if some of those other tasks that you had to do become more urgent, they'll come up in the ranks. They'll be higher priority for short-term urgency and have you get them done faster. And that's what I do. I'll never get everything I want done in the same day. But at least I do those things which have the biggest value or I feel are the most important to do. It's a big picture. Okay, next question. Vidura is asking, does every traffic type have headers of all the layers? The answer is no, they don't. Oh, my lab just closed, or I could show you. Yeah, it'd take about 2 minutes to open it. Let me just explain it. So if a computer is sending out a packet, information on the network, if it's HTTP, let's say a browser, let's say you and I open up a browser, we go to www.espn.com or we go to google.com or some other site, that's requesting, our browser is requesting an application layer service. That means we will have an application layer header, HTTP in the case of web services or HTTPS in the case of secure web services. And then at layer 4, it would be HTTP and HTTPS both use TCP. So there would be a layer 4 header of TCP. And then they would all have an IP header at layer 3 for the IP address information, source and destination. And then they would all have layer 2 headers. But to counter all that, if Bob's computer just said ping to google.com, well, that'd be using DNS unless it's cached. Let's do a ping to 8888. If we did a ping to 8888, there's no application layer data. There's no official layer 4 protocol like TCP or UDP. There is ICMP being used behind the scenes, but that's really a helper protocol that's used with IP. So in that case, a ping packet for the ping request and the ping response, there wouldn't be header information for layer 4 or the application layer. Great question. So not every packet that leaves your computer is going to have all the layers. And ARP is another example. ARP request is not going to have layer 3 information or layer 4 information as well. All right, let me see if there's any other questions. And just looking for the ones that have my name in front of them. Dan's asking, do you have an ASA firepower class specifically on CBT Nuggets trained by me? Yes, we do. I think it's called Firepower Essentials, or if you search for me and just go down all the things I've made, I have a course on firepower that I think I did like 8 months ago, 9 months ago. It was before Cisco Live last year that I created that. I think maybe a Firepower Fundamentals. I forgot the actual name of it, but it is created by me. So thanks for that question. And Marie's saying, have you looked at ASMR? I love it for relaxing and calming. I haven't. Maybe that's something I should check out. I appreciate the tip. And then NTUTHUKO is stating, I've recently completed my old CCNA partially thanks to your videos. I want to know if it's advisable to go for the CompTIA A+ or an entry-level position to secure an entry-level position in the company. If you have your CCNA, you're beyond A+. Now, if the company requires a CompTIA A+ certification, definitely get it. If that's what they want, if that's what they're looking for, get it. But in my mind, if somebody's taken CCNA and passed that, in my mind, they have a basic understanding of computers and networks, and perhaps going on to Security Plus, which is generic security across the board, would be more appropriate use of your time. And the only reason would go to A+ from CompTIA would, if you're already a CCNA, would be the company wants it. They want you to have that certification. So that'd be my advice, is only if they really want you to have it. Otherwise, you've already graduated past that point of A+ if you have your CCNA. All right, Angelo stating, each switch port has its own MAC address. What is it used for? Great. So that's a great question. There is something called a base MAC address on a switch. So if we brought up a switch, it's on the other side of the wall. But imagine a 24-port switch from Cisco. It has what's called a base MAC address. And that's not found on the interfaces. That's not its layer 2 MAC address on the interfaces. It's the base MAC address for the whole box. And that's used for spanning tree as part of its priority. So part of its bridge ID. So spanning tree, it's the priority number plus the base MAC address, plus it actually has the VLAN ID added to it. Now on each of the interfaces, when there's a frame sent for spanning tree, what is the source layer 2 address going to be when a switch sends it out? I'm just 2 minutes away from a lab. So here's what you could do. Next time you lab it up, you could take a look at when it's sending BPDU messages of switches out of its port. Take a look at the source MAC address. I think it's possible, although I'd have to verify that it's using its own port layer 2 address as a source address as it sends that. It's either that or it's using some kind of assigned layer 2 address for that type of frame. But that's a possibility that it's using it for those frames. We have to look at it with a protocol analyzer, easy to do. And I'm going to launch this. I'm going to launch this lab. Hold on a second. Give me one moment. I'll just launch it, and then it'll be there in the background if we need it. All right. So I've got the lab launching. The other option is if we go to a switch port or a port on a layer 2 switch or a multi-layer switch, and we say no switch port, that takes that interface that we did the no switch port command on, and it makes it a layer 3 interface. And at that point, it's going to need that layer 2 address information for its source when it's sending layer 2 frames to another device. Whether it's re-encapsulating a packet and sending it to it, or it's communicating somewhere else, it's going to need that source layer 2 address on that layer 3 interface, because that's how the routed interfaces work. And then when this comes up, if we have more time, I'll go ahead and put a protocol. I'll put a protocol analyzer on the switch as it's sending BPDUs, and we can take a look at what that layer 2 address is that it's sending. But certainly a no switch port would be a certain reason for that as well. One of the things I remember not understanding for a long time when I was first learning CCNA back in like 1999, 2000 was, that base MAC address. Like, where's that coming from? Is it the port MAC address? Is it somewhere else? It's just the base MAC address built into the system, not on a specific port for spanning tree. And did I watch, Hammock's asking, did I watch Cisco Live this year? So Cisco Live is around the world. Melbourne got canceled. The physical event got canceled. And they had one in Spain before that did happen. And they've got one coming up in Nevada here, which I'm speaking at. And hopefully that one won't get canceled. But if it does, I completely understand. So I haven't watched any of the videos from the other Cisco Lives that have happened recently, but they're free. Cisco makes those videos free. You can just go online, sign up for an account, and watch those videos, which is great. Okay. Omar's asking, is downloading or uploading a file from the internet, is this an FTP protocol port 21? Probably not. So from an official perspective, there are many application layer protocols. If we go to a web page for web services, it's likely we're using HTTP or the secure flavor HTTPS. Both of those use TCP at layer 4 below it. If we're doing a DNS request, like our computer needs to know what's the IP address behind www.cbtnuggets.com, a DNS request is an application layer service that at layer 4 uses UDP, and then that gets encapsulated in IP header, source destination layer 2 header, source destination layer 2 address, and then forwarded on the network. And so your question regarding if I just go to the internet and I download a file through Google Drive or something else, is that using FTP? And probably not, because what we can also do is we can also move files using other protocols. So FTP is an application layer service called FTP File Transfer Protocol. Its well-known port for connecting to it is the TCP port 21. Yeah. And for HTTP, its well-known port is TCP port 80. For HTTPS, the well-known port is 443. But if you just download this thing from the internet, the reality is, unless they're specifically using FTP as the protocol, port 21 won't be involved. If they're using HTTP or HTTPS and they're actually transferring a file over that protocol, then it would be using those ports. That's a great question. It's like, so it's the cart or the horse? Which one comes first? The application, whatever they're using, is going to use the ports associated with that. So if they're not using FTP, you won't have port 21. Great questions. Okay. All right. There's a question regarding BGP, which I will leave that one for. Well, I leave that for Discord. If you want to repeat that in the Discord channel in the other section, I'd be happy to take a look at it and answer it there for you. And Dina's asking, what time management tips can you share to avoid feeling overloaded and overwhelmed studying IT? Slow and steady wins the race is the coaching I would give to you. This is not. When I got I have a motorcycle license. Ooh. So I haven't ridden a motorcycle all my life, but I bought something recently and 2 summers ago, and I wanted to get a motorcycle license. So in the August of 2 years ago, I went to take this course. It was outside on the pavement in Las Vegas. It was like 115 degrees outside, or it felt hot. It was really, really hot. Anyway, I took all we did book learning first, then we got on these motorcycles, and when they trained us how to do figure eights and slowing and stopping and being safe and realizing that almost everything on the street is going to try to kill you. That's not, in Vegas, that's not untrue. I also have a 360 video, I think, where I took a 360 camera on a pole, stuck it down my jacket, and I cruised the strip. So if you want to see a 360 video of a motorcycle ride through the Las Vegas Strip, that's on my YouTube channel somewhere. But getting back to time management, one of the things I learned from that motorcycle class was, if you're with a group of riders, which is a fun thing to do, and they're all going, through these canyons or curves, or they're going through whatever part of town they're going through, if they are going too fast for your comfort, where you're not quite comfortable at being safe, if you follow that speed, the coaching is ride your own ride. And that's the secret for learning IT as well. It's set out what you want to study, set out a nice gradual path that is consistent with time. That's it. And if we don't spend any time doing it, you might as well I don't want anybody to give up. But if you don't commit time and allocate that time, it's not going to happen like you want it to happen. So allocate the time, show up, work through what you want to learn, and then just keep on going. That's just it. Ride your own ride. If you have a blueprint, you've ranked yourself from 1 to 5 on each item, and you're a 2, which is not good, versus a 5, which is an expert, work on, okay, I'm a 2 on this topic of hot standby router protocol or fault-tolerant default gateways, and I want to get myself from a 2 to a 3, and then study for an hour, and then go back and rank yourself. How am I now? Oh, 2.5. Okay. So I'm going to still work on that and continue to work, and maybe take all your topics that are 2s, get them to 3s, and ride your own ride. That was a secret for my first CCIE, which I got the first time. And that's because I wasn't in a rush. I had a plan, and I just stuck to it, and I had good friends who motivated me and helped me. Ed Yanez being the primary one of those. I had other people in my life that were saying, oh, come on, let's go out. You don't need to study again. You've been studying all week so long. Yeah. I have, but this is super important to me. And it won't be like that forever. However, if you get in the habit of studying and then you keep on studying and just keep on gradually learning, it's going to serve you well for the rest of your life. And technology is going to, what's the word I'm looking for? Oh yeah, change. And as it changes, you can adopt those new skills and keep on going. So make it a priority, schedule the time, and ride your own ride. I can compare myself to others and get very depressed very fast, but I just take a look at where I am now, where do I want to be, work towards it, and then I keep on moving that benchmark forward and forward. Yep. CCNA 99. We've come a long way. Yes, we have. I'm so glad everybody's here. All right. Yeah, so after the CCNA, whatever you want to study, I mean, Linux is going to be important to know. So if you want to go for Red Hat or some other flavor of Linux or security, whatever is your passion or whatever you think would be, go to dice.com, monster.com, find out what people and companies are looking for, and I would approach that. Linux will serve you well. I was a Unix administrator at Paramount Pictures in 1994. That's when HPUX first came out, or was recent out, and these big, huge mini computers running HPUX, and me and one other guy, Tom, was in charge of that bad boy. And so I had a crash course in Linux administration and SQL Server, and some of that basic knowledge served me well as I picked up new things along the way. Oh, Vidura, thank you. We are getting close to 100,000 subscribers, and that is fantastic. The word is getting out. People are finding that this is a good resource to learn from, and I'm grateful. So we don't monetize. It's not a financial thing. It's more of a how can we make an impact on the world one person at a time. And if there's 100,000 people over time, that's great too. So that number is coming. That's great. Okay. Sitharthan, I believe is the pronunciation. Sitharthan. Thank you for being here and thanks for your question. I'm a random guy. Me too. Both on the same sheet of music. We're random guys watching this live. What is the advice you'd give to somebody to get started learning with networking and cybersecurity? Fantastic question. I would start with networking first. Having a CCNA is a good baseline as an entry-level point for I understand networking. So is CompTIA's Network Plus. Those are both, an employer would say, okay, I see that you have some basic networking skills, but as you start studying cybersecurity, you're going to learn about things like SYN flood attacks and denial of service attacks and spoofing attacks and all these things that cross-site scripting and other things that are being used on the network. And so if a person doesn't have that baseline yet of like, I don't know what a three-way handshake is, so how do I know if that three-way handshake is being spoofed or lied about? It's important to have the basics first. So either Network Plus or CCNA, either way, if you're here, go for CCNA. I would love to have you. Packet Tracer's free. Get all the hands-on practice you want. Lots of great resources out there. And then after that, there are some great cybersecurity options. CompTIA has some. Cisco has the Cybersecurity Associate that used to be called CCNA Cybersecurity or Cybersecurity CCNA. They've changed the exam that's coming out, I think, in May or June this year, and it's still the associate level, but it's not called officially CCNA. It's called the Cybersecurity Associate. There's other vendors who have them as well. I would say start with the basics like Security Plus from CompTIA or other entry-level ones and start learning. And then as you get more and more into it and involved, you'll be learning Kali Linux. And so your Linux skills will come into play. You'll start getting better and better with those types of tools. And then maybe you could go into pen testing, which could be like the Certified Ethical Hacker or something comparable. Something entry level. Just work your way up. And the key is practice, practice, practice as you go. And because of virtualization, you can practice almost everything. So with Kali Linux, you can either buy a Raspberry Pi for a physical device, or you can just virtualize everything. Get a copy of a VMware workstation and do it all virtually. Now, I did some hacking courses at CBT, and what we did was I had Kali Linux as a virtual machine, but then I got this external wireless adapters for Wi-Fi hacking, and then I connected it to my machine. So the virtual machine was using an external physical dedicated Wi-Fi adapter for, it's here in the box too, for the actual hacking attempts with AeroNet and all that good stuff. But the secret is one step at a time. So start with the fundamentals of networking and then build on with whatever your passion is. And also if you're going into cybersecurity, keep yourself safe. Don't ever hack on people's networks where you're not authorized to do so. And if you're not sure if you're authorized or not, don't do it, because corporations don't take that lightly. That could be grounds for being terminated immediately if you're running any type of hacking tool on their network. And most networks, if they're decent, are going to be watching for it with IPS and IDS looking for people doing a port scan. It's like port scan coming from here, track it down to the layer 2 address. It's on this port, it's this device, and then they show up at your cube moments later and say, please pack your bags. That's real, by the way. If somebody's doing hacking tools and it's malicious, meaning it wasn't like malware, it was themselves, there's not too many excuses for that person that they can make. So be careful. Life's good. Life's really good. Just play above the line so you can keep your job. All right, let me see if there's any other questions here. What was my motivation for getting into networking? Murray, thanks for the question. I think I've told the story about I was a cashier back in 1984-ish. I was a cashier, and I saw somebody who was coming in to repair the cash registers, and I thought, this looks like a great job. Long story short, I got a loan, student loan, for I think it was $6,000, went to Control Data Institute in Los Angeles, California. It was a 1-year program. Loved it. This back in those days, it was green, the screen, big CRT monitors with text. Oh, look at that. And back in those days, to record a program, it was a tape player, like a cassette player, where you'd write a program in BASIC, and then you'd click on save, and then you'd click on record on the tape player, and it would record it to the tape player as it was recording. Analog. Crazy times. And so while I was going to school, I got a job at a bank that was inside Walmart. And this bank is no more, but it was a bank with a little stand and everything inside of Walmart. Nobody ever came in. I think I had one transaction in 6 months. So while I was going to school, I was also recently married. So while I was going to school, I was also working this job part-time, and they had a machine. They called it an IBM PC. So the PCs came out in the early 80s, and then they came out with hard drives, these full height, like monstrous hard drives, 10 megabytes on this huge thing. And so what I did was I said to myself, I'm going to train myself on how to use this. So I got the manual, and I learned how to make a directory, and I learned how to change directories, and then I learned how to work with simple databases. And then the bank asked me for help on their other systems. This is back in the early 80s. So I was learning IT at the time. I wasn't learning networking yet, but I was learning computers, and I just loved it. I still love it. Oh my gosh, how cool is it, right? I mean, it's like Tinker Toys. It's like the ultimate set of Tinker Toys. Combine and compare, put things together, make the protocols work together, and people need it. I remember the first time I was on Novell back in like early days. I just barely got my Novell certification, and a company said, well, we can't print. We need your help. And so they hired me. I came out. I said, oh, yeah, this group is associated with that printer. Click, click. They were so happy. And I thought, okay, I get it. A little bit of knowledge goes a long way. And that's how I got into IT, just by looking at being a cashier, seeing a commercial for Control Data Institute, and never looking back. All right, Van Ray, good to have you here. Thanks for stopping by. And Ahmed's asking, should I go for studying programming language in depth for CCNA DevNet and its SDN will replace legacy? Here's what I would do. I would make sure, Ahmed, that you're comfortable with networking and how things work. Firewalls, but concept-wise, layer 2 switching, trunking, VLANs, IP addressing, DHCP relay, 802.1q tagging, routing of IPv4 and IPv6, dynamic routing protocols, security, dynamic ARP inspection, port security, etc. We've covered a lot of these topics in this master playlist. As far as programming goes, you definitely want to and I'm going to help you in this channel. We're going to talk about some of the basics to get you warmed up and started with what an API is, how to use an API, why they exist, how simple they are with Postman to create. And then as you look at enough Python scripts and something called a YAML model as far as how they're formatted, it's going to become more comfortable. And we don't really need to write scripts, like create them from scratch. We can say, here's what I want to have happen. Click on a button. It gives us the format, and we can use that as a script if we need to. But as we get more and more automated, there's going to be more and more controllers with an overlay that orchestrates all of it, that's going to know how to do all that. So all we need to know is how the things work on the back end, how they integrate together, the APIs. And if we have to troubleshoot, we might need to go and look at a Python script occasionally. But as far as becoming a programmer and writing code from scratch, no, that's not our future. Our future is George Jetson. If you're too young to know that, George Jetson at Spacely Sprockets was a cartoon from the 70s, maybe late 70s. And his job at Spacely Sprockets was to take his finger and hit the button. That's all he did, because everything's automated. And it's not going to be quite that simple, because if things don't work, somebody needs to know how those overlaid networks and underlaid networks, how they all function. And CCNA is a good starting point for that journey of how a network operates. So yeah, I'm not going to be an advanced programmer. My son, Paul, he's amazing. I mean, incredible, the stuff he knows. And that's not what I am capable of doing. I'm not writing code from scratch. I'm not writing an app for an Android or an iOS or a Cisco iOS for a Apple device or a computer. But we do want to be aware of how scripting works because we're going to want to automate a lot of it. All right, Omar, thanks for that feedback. All right. Yeah, Murray says, I love going to work every day. I do too, and I work out of this office. But I do. I love the challenges and opportunities, especially if you have good management, you have a good support structure that trusts you and appreciates your work. It's great. And if you do, try to do more than what you're paid for, everybody. And that way you can go to sleep at night knowing, I did a good job this day, and I'm going to do a good job tomorrow. I'm going to keep learning and keep learning and keep learning. One thing too is that I've always been surprised when people aren't willing to invest in themselves just a little bit. I have a playlist here somewhere buried on my YouTube channel about how to succeed, and I'm just like an average, super average person. But the way I succeeded was setting goals and taking measurable steps. And one of my secrets is investing 3% in myself every year. What do you mean, Keith? 3%. I take my gross income, and I take 3% of that before taxes, which is another story. And I invest that in myself, and I don't expect to be reimbursed for it. I don't expect to have somebody else pay for it. Like if I need, I have subscriptions to Safari Books Online is one of those teeny little things. Or if I want to learn a new technology and then we don't have a course at CBT Nuggets, I might go buy a course, right? Or buy some books or buy gear that I want to learn, and I do it on my own dime for that because that's mine. It's like that 3% is mine for my self-improvement. Also, I've discovered that if I spend my own money on something, you may have this experience too. If I spend my own money on something, it's more important. Like when I first bought my first 3 4000 series routers back in 1980, let me get my years right. I guess it was 1998 when I first got into Cisco. That like $5,000 for those 3 routers total. And then I'd spend more on the modules, nightmare. Anyway, I got them, but I was motivated. Like, okay, I've got some serious money on the line here. Back in those days, it was even, $5,000. Like, it was more than I had available. I mean, it wasn't discretionary income. I had to scrimp and save and put some on credit. So I got those, and I had more motivation in the game. So if you invest a little bit in yourself, when I was at Paramount Pictures, I was a manager at Paramount Pictures for maybe a year and a half before I moved to Las Vegas. And I remember being at a workshop. It was a Fred Pryor seminar. And Fred Pryor used to be, they're probably still around. They did workshops and seminars around the country. And I would go because I was interested in how to be a better whatever, a better person, better leader, better manager, etc. And I would go to these things, and they would have these, in those days, cassette tapes, like courses on how to be a better communicator by Nito Cobain and Brian Tracy and some other people that I have different opinions about now. But anyway, different courses. And I remember buying a couple. And I get in those days, I was buying them on my own dime. I wasn't like looking to be reimbursed. I'm going to buy these, and I'm going to spend my own money, and I'm going to use these. I'm going to go ahead and make my life, myself better. If we can pull like 2 or 3 ideas that work from something that we've invested in, we're better off for it. Where if the company just bought it for me, they said they could buy something, I buy it, it goes on a shelf, I never watch it, not too valuable. So I remember being there. I was young, younger. So that was Paramount Pictures, I guess that was like 1993, 1994, I think, if I look back at the dates. So if you take whatever the year is today minus that date, and that's how young I was, but I was fairly young compared to now. And I bought these courses, and I still remember people next to me saying, I'm not going to spend my money on that. I thought to myself, okay. Not because I felt it was a diss. I thought, you're missing out. If there's something you can do and spend your own money and have invested interest in it and make yourself better, do it. So anyway, 3% is what I've done my entire life. And I probably spend a little more than that now. But it's totally worth it. I never have any regrets. Like, I shouldn't have spent that money on myself for my self-improvement. I shouldn't have invested in that gym membership. I should not have invested in that Cisco router. It always pays off for all the reasons we mentioned. So Murray, thanks for that. And Vidura is saying, when are you going to do a live stream with Jeremy Chara? So we had one set up. So Chuck Keith did one with Jeremy. He did 2 with Jeremy. And they use a combination of Skype to get the screens dialed in and everything else. So Jeremy invited me about time flies, 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago to do one with him. I said, yeah, I'm in. And right before it started to go live, there was some hiccups. I've never done it, a live stream with two people, so it was his stream, his channel, and we just couldn't get it all dialed in. And so right before we started, I said, Jeremy, just make sure that your stream survives. I'll jump in the chats, and I will just be here, in text only. Let's not spoil the whole stream because we couldn't get the tech stuff worked out. So he did it live. I don't know when that's going to happen. We'll see. Chuck Keith is amazing. Jeremy's amazing. Another amazing person, if you're into DevNet and automation, is Knox Hutchinson. His code name on the YouTube interwebs is DataKnox, DATAKNOX. Jeff Kish is a double CCI. He's also very, very good. I would recommend joining or taking a peek at all those people. And Jeremy's IT Labs, not Jeremy Chara, but Jeremy IT Labs is it's pretty darn complete with a lot of training for CCNA as well. And I encourage you to use any resource that works for you, including this channel and anything else that works for you. If you have some paid services like CBT Nuggets or others, that's great too. So the key is make a commitment, study consistently, ride your own ride, measure your own success, and then enjoy the benefits of doing all that. So we'll see about Jeremy and I. What do I think, says Angelo, about IPv6? I find it pretty hard, and I'm learning about IPv6 static routes for now. I cannot imagine the OSPF lab. Great. So for CCNA, there's no OSPF version 3 for CCNA. So all you need to worry about for IPv6 is make sure you're comfortable with what a global address is, a link local address, neighbor discovery protocol, that concept, how it works. We'll cover all those in this. We'll cover many of those concepts in this stream as well as we continue to build the playlist. And static routing. So OSPF version 3 isn't on the blueprint for CCNA. But it's pretty similar to OSPF version 2 for IPv4, except with IPv6, there's no network statements, no wildcard masks. You just go to every interface and say, hey, you're in, you're in, you're in. So if that helps, good. Just static, the basics of how IPv6 works and static routes for it. Yep, Murray, I agree. Thank you for that. All right, Steve saying, I recently had a experience with the 200-125 and didn't quite pass because I ran out of time. That happens to the best of us. Can you give suggestions on gaining speed for the new test since it has more questions? The new test is, and I have not sat it yet, I'm going to sit it before Cisco Live, which is less than 2 months away now. The new exam is more fair. It's not going to ask any questions that are really way out there. That's the feedback I've gotten. So what I would do to ramp up on that is grab the blueprint. Here's all my notes on it. But grab the blueprint and just go down the list and say, do I know this? Such as IP connectivity, section 3, routing protocol codes. Do I know what that is? Do I know what the routing protocol codes are for like EIGRP and RIP and OSPF? And there's a good chance when you look at that content, you say, yeah, I know what those are, and rank yourself 1 to 5, and just go to, the routing table where the prefix is and the network mask, the next hop, the AD, and just rank yourself. And if you're at like a 4 on any of those topics, like I really understand this, I could explain this to somebody else, that's your ramp up. And then just do a quick review of those things just to make sure you're on top of it, and away you go. Well, other pieces such as Module 6, which is automation and programmability. Here we go. 6.5. Describe the characteristics of REST-based APIs, including CRUD, HTTP verbs, and data encoding. Now, if that's new to you, you say, oh, it's great. I'm ranking myself a 1, and I'm going to go read a chapter in a book on that, or I'm going to watch a couple videos and see if I can get myself to a 2, and then by the time you're done, you could probably even test a REST API using Postman, and just go out to a publicly available website and verify the APIs and say, oh yeah, I get this. I get how that works. I get what a verb is with HTTP, and just brush up on those pieces. So that's what I would do. I would identify pieces that you know, identify pieces you need to study, and then just focus on those pieces you need to learn and study, and then go for it. The fact that it's more questions doesn't mean it's necessarily harder. And again, my opinion is going to be more fair, less corner case stuff, more fair. All right, let me see if there's any others with my name on it. And M. Omar is asking, hey, Keith, do you plan on doing the same thing for CCNP as you do here on CCNA in this channel? And I think that this CCNA opportunity that you and I have here is probably good for 3 or 4 years, to be truthful, because there's so many aspects and topics. We just took, what did we take today? Network summarization, IPv4 route summaries. And we talked about what it is, how it works, gave a couple examples of it, and there was a whole live stream, and we took Q&A. I think there's so much more for CCNA that we still need to do, and I plan on just, it's never going to be thorough. Like, it's never going to be this channel. It's all you need to do is just watch Keith and be done, because there's hands-on practice that you definitely have to do. You want to take a look at every bullet on the blueprint and make sure you're comfortable with all those topics, whether or not we covered it here or not. I'm going to cover probably many of them, most of them, in a casual fashion. And, what was oh, so I think this could go on for a long time, including troubleshooting, where, let's imagine we cover together, we cover all the topics for CCNA. Well, all the significant topics for CCNA. We don't cover every single item. And if you think about it, if it takes 2 hours in the live stream for one topic, and there's like 100 topics, it's not reasonable to go through 200 hours of content. So this is kind of like a brush up on those areas that you'd want to learn about and so forth. And boy, that's the second time I lost the topic. So for CCNP, I think there's just so much more at the CCNP level that we could go into. So for the foreseeable future, I'm going to focus on CCNA here, and I appreciate everybody's help in doing it. Also, it allows me not to have to spend hours and hours preparing for each live stream, because I can take this concept, like last night, I said, okay, I already promised we're going to do subnetting or supernetting or summarization, route summarization. Let me think of, I got my iPad out last night. Let me think of some routes that we could summarize. Let me think of a lab I could have that we could demonstrate this on and how I could do it. So I spent maybe an hour in prep, and then it just takes a couple hours to do, and then we're done. And I didn't have to spend, a lot of time. Where if we were going to have a topic like EIGRP metric calculation, which involves the lowest link in the path, and that as part of the equation, along with the sum of the delays and the advertised distance, which has to be less than the feasible distance, because that's the feasibility condition, then we can have a feasible successor. And if we use the variance, there's so much more. So if you're interested in our CCNP stuff or my CCNP stuff, that's probably only going to be available at CBT Nuggets, as I won't be doing a whole channel here on CCNP. But I appreciate the interest, and I am committed to CCNA. I think we can help the most people here. Again, that's my thinking there. So thanks for the request and the interest. All right. Amana is asking, how long might it take me to pass the current CCNA starting today? Does it help to have a Network Plus in obtaining CCNA Cert 2? If a person has the Network Plus, that is going to help a lot, because Network Plus has helped demonstrate that you have a basic knowledge of things like IP addressing and ARP and the protocol stack and trunking and VLANs and a lot of that infrastructure stuff. And then you can just, on top of that, add the Cisco specific aspects to those technologies. If you're brand new and you don't know that stuff yet, you can still start with CCNA. I would get a good book. Just go to Amazon, search for 200-301, and look at the ratings. See what people are saying about a good book. There's no such thing as a perfect book, but there's a good book. I would encourage you to use free resources like Packet Tracer for hands-on labs, hands-on practice. There's some great courses. I will mention Udemy has some great courses. CBT Nuggets has a subscription that includes, all of CCNA, 52 hours plus VMware and Microsoft and Juniper and Palo Alto and Citra and Checkpoint and others. So there's paid options, there's free options, and any way you want to start is fine. But I would say if a person was brand new to networking, it might take 3 to 4 months of consistent practice, like 4 or 5 hours. It depends on how you study and how you learn, but 3 to 4 months could probably be done if it was consistent. That isn't like no study, cram. It's more like 4 or 5 hours a week, 4 or 5 hours a week, 4 or 5 hours a week of really learning it and practicing it to get that muscle memory, and then taking the exam to demonstrate that. All right. All right. Good night, Maurice. Good night from the UK. I don't know what time it is there. Oh, it's like probably like 9:30 there in the UK, or worse, or later. So be safe out there with keeping your hands washed and all that good stuff, no matter where you are in the world. The coronavirus is not a respecter of persons. Ahmed's asking, when a PC is connected to phone traffic of PC tagged by the phone. Let me just read this real quick. So this is a topic that is not going to come up on your... I don't recall seeing this in the blueprint, but if we have a switch and it has a connection that goes to an IP phone, and then there's another little access port or switch port that goes to a PC, what happens is the voice traffic is tagged with an 802.1q tag for the voice VLAN. And that way your PC and your voice over IP telephone are on different VLANs. Now, why would that matter? So they're going to be on different subnets at layer 3 and different layer 2 broadcast domains. It's because most networks are going to take their layer 2 VLANs for voice, their voice VLANs, and their associated IP addresses, and they're going to prioritize that traffic for less latency. And so the question was regarding how do you know which is which, and that goes into the telephone. So whatever your voice VLAN is, if it's VLAN 10, it's going to have a tag for VLAN 10, and you could then look at that traffic on the switch and say, okay, this is the VLAN 10 traffic coming from the phone. But that VLAN 10 could be VLAN 2 or VLAN 9, whatever you want your voice VLAN to be. All right, and Hamzix is saying, I passed the Microsoft MTA Network Fundamentals. Does it have any value? You know, Microsoft just recently announced a whole revamping of all their certifications. So my earliest certification with Microsoft was back in the 80s when I got my Windows NT4. I was saying, NT, what's that? New technology. I got my MCSE back in Microsoft Certified Systems Engineer back in those days, and then I had one I think for 2000, and then I haven't renewed it since then. So I'm not up to speed on the current certifications and how much weight they have. So if I knew regarding that Microsoft certification, I would tell you. But if you learn something in that certification, that's valuable, whether or not the market sees it. So you take that knowledge and just parlay it forward. All right, and Deepak is, I think this is our last question. Can you please tell if the entire internet is built on Cisco devices? And the answer is it is not, because I know firsthand that Google and Amazon Web Services and many providers use gear other than Cisco in their data centers and in their service provider aspects as they're moving traffic back and forth. So it's definitely not all Cisco. I don't know what the ratio is, but it's definitely not even 80% all Cisco. But Cisco is the leader as far as the industry standard, and people are expected to understand Cisco, even if you go into shop. That was one of my challenges for my friend who studied Cisco networking, and then he went to work for Amazon Web Services, and they had something different in their shops. They write their own code for many of their switches, by the way. And so he was racking and stacking and configuring with scripts these devices that were neither Cisco or anything else. They were their proprietary ones for Amazon inside of one of their data centers. And I don't have the details on like how they code that or what they use. Somebody else would know that. But I know that most of the internet is not I guess all of it is not Cisco. Probably there's a huge chunk of it that is for routing and switching, but that's the answer to your question as far as I know. Okay, Rodriguez asking, what happens when you put an unmanaged switch between voice VLAN and PC? Well, the unmanaged switch is very unlikely going to be able to carry. It depends if that unmanaged switch is trunking or not. So if you have a switch or a device that isn't trunking or can't, that's a great question. So if the passive switch passed through the 802.1q tags, then it shouldn't have an impact on any of that. Well, there's several variables to that. One is that when a PC phone connects to a switch, they use CDP to actually determine what the voice VLAN is. And so if that interim switch, which is a non-managed switch, if it just really allows everything to go through and doesn't stop anything, it's possible it could work. If the CDP messages went through and the 802.1q tags went through, it's possible it might work. But I don't know. That sounds like a job interview question. What would happen? And if I got that question in a job interview, I'd simply say, well, let's think about that logically. If it was an unmanaged switch and it passed through everything, I'd just explain it just like I did without having to repeat it. Yeah. Okay, Deepak, you're very welcome. Hey, I've had a great time. What time is it? It's 34 minutes after the hour, 11, 12. Wow, that's an hour and a half. So the goal is in these streams is to cover the topic. In this case, it was summary routes and route summarization for IPv4 in the first 30 to 50 minutes, if possible, which is what we did. We did 2 examples of that, one with external routes into Ospf with an ASBR, and then we summarized the routes at the ASBR, so the rest of the network only had to learn about those 3 routes. The other example we did was EIGRP, which is done at the interface, and we took a set of routes and we did a summary route at the interface so that the downstream routers didn't have to remember all those. So, hey, thanks for joining. The biggest thing I can offer you is my gratitude for being here. You're awesome. You rock. And networking has changed my life for the better. It's night and day. Ever since I got into it back in the early 80s. So early 80s was PCs, field technician, and then shortly thereafter with Novell. I say Novell looking. I shouldn't roll my eyes. Novell was the game back in the late 80s, early 90s as far as how to network. And then Microsoft came in, and then Cisco with their hardware solutions just dominated the world. And then now there's additional competition. But if you know somebody who is interested in getting into networking and they want to have the ability to understand networking and troubleshoot networking, CCNA is a good place to start. If you haven't already, please click on subscribe so that you get alerts. Also, click on the alert bell so you can be alerts when we do live streams. Our live streams are, so far, cross our fingers, Wednesdays, consistently at 4 p.m. Pacific time, where it's a CCNA topic. Saturdays, which is like today, at 11 a.m. Pacific time, where we focus on something in the world of subnetting. So we started off with session 1 with what is a IP address, and then we went on to the mask and the bits and the binary and so forth. And then on Sundays, another CCNA topic. And I've got, based on Discord, which I hope you can join if you want to chat and help us out or ask questions. The Discord server, the link is, I think, in this chat stream. I also have posted it to this video. In the Discord server, if you have requests for videos, please let me know what they are. Regarding CCNA and the current blueprint, I have 20 ideas that I'm working through. So that will be about 10 weeks of content. And then as I get new ideas going forward, I'm going to include more packet tracer because I've got an overwhelming response of people saying, hey, building that wireless LAN controller from the ground up, showing us all the pieces, that's useful. And then also providing that framework from my website page, you can download it, that's useful. So I'm going to take those ideas and keep on pushing them forward. And, thanks for your response, Gus. All right, so I will see everybody who wants to be here tomorrow, same bat time, which is 11 a.m. Pacific time. I haven't identified the exact topic. I have a few choices I'm dealing with, but I'll push it out on social later tonight or early tomorrow morning so you'll know what the topic is. If you can join us, we'd love to have you. And if you can't join us, catch us in the recording. In either case, I appreciate your attention to making yourself better. And so if any of this helps you, go ahead and give the video a thumbs up. That way other people will know as well. And I'll see you and everybody else in another video. Thanks, everyone.